Right, this is going to be a new episode of Summoning Insight. Obviously, if you're watching on Twitch, this is live, where the prime's at in the chat. If you're not watching, if you're watching on a VOD, good news. You can also click on this YouTube channel and watch the Best Damn League show with me and Dom, where we talk about LEC. Now, of course, this show is brought to you by esports.bet, the industry's leading crypto odds matrix, and as well as their classic first-time deposit bonus, 50% up to 100 USDT, they have a feature that we're now offering, which is if you've signed up using our referral link, and this is a first-time deposit bonus, guys, or a first-time bonus, rather. Basically, you can bet on our match of the week and get more out of your bet, potentially, if you win. So what you can do is the match of the week, you can also see there'll be competitive edge on the esports bet channel. We talk about it on there, but if you want the short version, the bet match of the week is obviously KT Roast against Gen.G, the two best teams in LCK. It's a battle for the top of the division, basically. And more importantly, even though it's basically a pick'em game, who do you prefer? The odds, because Gen.G has never lost and they beat KT in those questionable circumstances at the beginning of the split, everyone has bet Gen.G like a madman. So the odds for KT are really, really high. They're well over 2. They were around like 2.4, 2.6.
I'll pull them up right now. They're now at, by the way, Thorin, since we did competitive edge yesterday, they have actually gone up. So KT is now at 2.980. So
well,
almost
basically,
3.
Almost 1 in 3 times is all you'd have to be right that KT wins. And we actually think they're going to win. We even think they might even be the slight favourite. So we're saying this is the match of the week to bet. And what you could do is not only if you bet this, will you win 10% extra if you used our referral. This is your first bet, up to 100 USDT capped or equivalent cryptocurrencies. But you can even synergize it if you've never bet before with the first time risk-free bet. Like you could essentially do that. And then if you lost this bet, then you could just get the stake back by contacting esports.bet on their Discord. There you go. Obviously, check out Competitive Edge for the other bets that we made this week.
That's right. And we have another new channel that we launched this week on Last Free Nation. So Thorin has an NBA show with Maui Snake, which you can look up at Last Free Nation Sports, which is really interesting because you started out with a banger, which is creating your all-time MVP team of NBA players, right?
I mean, essentially, this is also where I don't make content like the way normal YouTube people do. Essentially, this should probably have been 5 different videos, like each position, one video for the GOAT. But what I wanted to do was this, because people have never heard me talk at length about the NBA, and definitely not like I would an esports analysis show. Since me and Maui Snake are 2 of the better duos, I think me and Dom are the other one for doing like debates on things where he thinks the opposite and I think this, and then we have like an interesting conversation about it. I thought we would just launch it so you get like a really strong, like big taste of what I'm into, what my philosophies are. And so I did just a bonanza episode, basically. Like Monty says, it's not just who is the GOAT, it's like who are the GOAT contenders. And then for each different of the 5 roles, who should even be in the conversation, and then who do we narrow it down and pick each, and then we go back and forth on all of it. Now, one reason also I wanted to make this show is because what people don't know is in the same way as I have followed esports games, I have followed things like the NBA, film, comics in a very similar manner. I have a very sort of vertical interest in them where I go deep on the things I'm interested in. And then if it's what I love enough, and maybe I have a horizontal interest as well. I know generally around the scene and what things were like back then. So what people won't know is I actually can, just like I do in esports and CSGO, break down the NBA like that. And I have some very different takes. As usual, spoiler, here's one for you for free to make you mad triggered. I think Karl Malone is the best power forward of all time. Kiss my ass. I don't even care. Go check out the video if you want to know what. But how about Tim Duncan? I'm the best Duncan to ever touch basketball, motherfucker. He's just him. So here's the thing. If people don't know, the reason why I also wanted to make this series is because I can't do that thing other people do where you get your jollies off by going on Reddit and arguing with people. Because what has happened in sports is as I've gotten older and I've seen more of sports, I've realized you're not even now debating points. You're actually debating people that saw a YouTube video of the person you saw the career of and telling you that that guy can't be as good as someone they saw play. Hence, LeBron James is just the best at everything, isn't he? Because it's the only one you saw, you moron. So my analogy is it would be like someone who's a classic cinephile, has watched all of cinema. He loves the 50s, the 60s, 70s, maybe he's his favorite, you know. He appreciates the modern classics, you know, the Coppolas, the Michael Manns of the world, the Christopher Nolans. And then what happens is some kid goes, ha, you think that movie from the 70s I haven't watched is good? Ha, Inception is the best movie ever. You wouldn't waste your time arguing. You'd go, you haven't seen it, so what am I arguing about? So basically, check out the LFN Sports channel if you want to see more.
That's right. And we launched our new show with Richard, which is Foreplay, which we discussed on a previous episode, where the premise is that we choose a genre. This month's genre is cosmic horror, and we watch 4 movies from that genre. We will be recording another episode tomorrow on Annihilation. First one was The Thing, and so go check that out on Last Free Nation Culture alongside my show with Doa, Nerd Legion. So we have a lot of fucking content coming out, guys. It's a ton. So please go subscribe to those channels if you are interested. Give them a watch, give them a try. You may like it. Who knows? You have any thoughts on our new show with Richard?
I think it's a good concept. I will say, this is where I'll sort of spoil it for you and tell you there's no Christmas. I noticed everyone does that thing that they all do, which is everyone who's interested in something on the internet can't just say, this is really good, I enjoyed it. They have to like interact by being a reply guy and one-upping you. So what they'll do is they'll go, great concept. I think you should cover this movie next. It's like, we already said the 4 movies we're doing. Like, we're not going to do like 100 movies in this genre. What you're basically doing, I get it, is you're peacocking. You're showing, I know another movie in that genre that I think is good. By the way, here's how you can phrase the same comment. It'll be brilliant. Just go, if anyone enjoys this genre, I actually have a movie that's one of the 4 they didn't recommend. I'd say check this one out for reasons X, Y, and Z. That'd be a really cool way to do it. And then, you know what? It's unlikely, but maybe one day I'll actually never do this. But, you know, hypothetically, everything's possible. Maybe one day we do read that comment and we go, maybe we'll check that movie out. Again, I won't do that. I definitely won't. I promise you right now. You know, cross my heart, open the die. I'll never, ever do that ever in my whole life. But it's possible. So just saying, you know. Thanks for the comment.
Well, the comments are helpful for the algorithm and for our engagement.
Yeah,
So there you go, guys. We're starting to do all kinds of content, non-esports content. Now's the time. If you really want to help us, go subscribe to these channels, go watch them, like, comment, share them with your friends. And I think the cool thing about Foreplay is that if you want to get more into cinema, you can just watch along with us every week. You can look at the Last Free Nation Culture Twitter, or it's LFN Culture on Twitter, or a community post on the YouTube page for Last Free Nation Culture, and that'll have the order and weeks we're watching the movies. So all you have to do is watch the movies before the show comes out that week, and then you can probably enjoy the discussion just a little bit more. So we're trying to do more or less a watch along with you guys. So there you go.
All right, where are we starting?
Probably with LCK salary caps, don't you think?
I mean, that would be a 4 horseman topic personally, but we can do that if you want.
we can touch on it. We can touch on it briefly here, because this news came out yesterday, which is basically there is going to be a soft salary cap with a luxury tax introduced into the LCK. Now, nobody else is going to talk about this because nobody else can be critical about this. We don't know what the number of the salary cap is because they've said that they are going to introduce that quietly later into the rule book. By the way, everybody, I hope this is obvious, but that rule book is not translated into English. So get fucked, everyone else in the world who wants to know what the rules of the LCK are and what the potential cap restrictions are going to be. So we're going to have to, later on down the road when that happens, get some more details and some translations from Korean on that one, because they obviously don't want the rules in other languages because that just enables further criticism. So they will not translate it themselves. Basically, what this cap is, to be clear, let me put this right up front for those people who are saying that, oh, the players are going to be hurt like this. No, as we've talked about on the 4 Horsemen, the ecosystem is very much benefiting the players right now. The players are getting an overwhelming amount of money, much more than the revenue that is actually generated. LCK teams are not in a good place right now in terms of sustainability. In fact, here's a little nug for you guys. Some LCK teams, I'm not going to tell you which ones, have missed franchise payments now. So they are not able to actually pay their franchise fees because of the current situation within the LCK. And now they're trying to push this onto a path of sustainability. Now, this is only possible in Korea because they don't have antitrust laws. They couldn't do this without a players' union negotiating on the other side of the United States. But this is basically how leagues in Korea work. There aren't really players' unions, or not strong ones to my understanding, in traditional sports in Korea. And so they can just kind of unilaterally implement this. Now, we don't know what the exact number of the cap is, but the way that this works is that they are trying to incentivize teams to keep franchise or legacy players. So, for example, if you have played for 3 years with the team, then you receive basically your salary is reduced by 30%. Not that you get paid 30% less, guys, but your salary is reduced by 30% towards the cap. So let's say a player's getting $1 million and they've been with the team for 3 years. Well, only 700,000 of that would count against the cap, which means that in theory, teams can pay those players more while still having the same cap hit. Which helps them maintain those players, because basically it's saying they can pay them above market value. It's like a super contract in the NBA, right? Duncan, do you know anything about that?
I mean, you could also use the example, like, as far as I know, it's the same in the NFL. Like, it's like you're saying, like, for the max deals and the extensions in the NBA, I think it works the same way as the NFL, where, like, no one can actually pay you more in theory than your team that currently has you if you do the extra deal with them as a way to incentivize it.
Right. So it's not quite as explicit as that, but because it's just about a reduction of the cap hit, but it in theory would allow you to pay the player more for the same than another team for the same cap hit. And also, hilariously, they made a faker rule. Did you like this one? Where if you have won 5 LCK titles or 3 international championships, which count as MSI and Worlds, then all of a sudden you can have 50% off their salary cap in cap calculations. And they apparently combine. So if that's true and you've been at a team for more than 3 years. So apparently, I guess the thing is, like, only 20% of Faker's salary is going to count against the cap hit, because he has an 80% reduction from 30% and 50%. I believe that's how it works. So it's a little rough figuring out the particulars on this, guys, because Riot released it as an article that's been translated from Korean, so I'm not super confident on the details, but I think that is ostensibly how it works. And the only other player, by the way, who would qualify for the 50% reduction in their salary against the cap would be Peanut, who also has 5 domestic titles. But those are the only 2 players that are currently eligible for that. And obviously, like, they had to create a rule to keep Faker within the LCK. Because losing him and losing his star power, if someone else, in China or elsewhere was going to pay him an outrageous amount of money, would be quite a bad look for the league.
Well, I'll go through it all. First of all, the idea of a salary cap is something I actually have a massive problem with, because it's something that in theory I think is terrible. Like, it essentially means, as an individual, if you really were, let's imagine, this is hypothetical, let's imagine I actually was 100 times better than the second best player in the world. It's not like look, if functionally impossible, we're doing this theoretically as an abstract, because these rules do not at all apply to actual how good you are. They set a hard cap for anyone. Now, there's exceptions like you're saying, but the exceptions are quite clearly created, like Faker, to just edge him in and make it so that he doesn't get lost. So you're already fucking around a bit there, right? Well, first of all, the most crazy thing about that is I can never, ever get my value. I can never actually get an outrageous amount more than the second best guy. In fact, logically, like max deals in the NFL and NBA, it won't even just be that I don't get more. I will have to just get the same as the second best player. In fact, if you know how these leagues work, probably 10 of us are going to be getting that amount. So if I'm like absolutely far away, if I'm Faker in season 3, then spoiler, I can probably only make as much money in season 3 if this had been applied as the 10th best player in LCK. So let's say, like, I don't know, it would be back then, like, I'll make up a random one. Let's say Coco. He was a mid laner. He wasn't the best back then, but let's say I could only make as much as Coco. So that's already bad for me if I'm Faker. If I'm an exceptional player in year 1 or year 2 of my career, this is a bad scenario for me. Now, look, the practicality of why it exists is why I'm not necessarily against it. Because, first of all, unlike a lot of sports, especially American sports, this is a worldwide market. This is one where, I mean, this is why they created with the LPL angle aligned there. The first problem, the second new salary cap, we don't know the numbers yet, is the numbers for the LPL cap are known. In theory, no player is allowed to get more than $1.5 million a year. And they claim in the past that Knight was getting $6 million a year. I actually don't believe that number at all. But okay, let's say they do report him getting $6 million a year. The problem obviously would be, if it ends up that it's $1 million, say in LCK, then actually now, if Faker wants to make money, or any really other great player, you're actually incentivized to go to LPL. They could just get a 500,000 more, which is obviously the real problem. On the one hand, you want to ring fence the amount that you're spending for the LCK teams so they don't go bust. But at the same time, the worst thing ever would be if you lost all your talent. I mean, the analogy would be, it wasn't because of salary caps. There's a reason why people who, not often the best, but the second tier of really good EU players would go to LCS and be the stars of the LCS, because they could just pay pay you more. So even though it might not even be the league you want to play in, you do it for the finances and you do it because your career's short. So the problem there is like theory is different from practicality. So the reason why practically I'm not against it, I think it's actually necessary, is because first of all, I mean, I'll just say this. I think the inputs to the LPL specifically, some of them have nothing to do with business. There are literally just billionaires just wasting money there. And as a result, they don't have to run a real business. And as you want some of the orgs to actually be real businesses. And then secondly, I'll just say this. I imagine some of the inputs potentially are criminal or come from things like money laundering. I'll just say that. Why not? It's fucking obvious.
I mean,
there you go.
By the way, that has been true in every esport ever for the history of esports, which is that this has been, a money laundering enterprise in a variety of nations for a variety of reasons for a very long time.
And then look, in the sense of hurts them like they make less, obviously it will hurt them, Monty. It will directly hurt players. It won't hurt them in the sense they won't make any money or they make a bad living. That's obviously a different equation. The problem is this. I would even say if you're a player, this is actually good for you in the long run. And here's why. Because if these teams don't pay their franchise fees, or in LCS, they're just leaving or planning on leaving, there won't be someone else to pay you the $3 million in 3 years. So what you want actually is teams to stabilize, most importantly, survive the next year and a half or so of this esports winter. And then there might actually be an industry where, at least here's the thing, think about it long term. Instead of getting like a large slice of a pie that no longer will exist in 2 years, you're getting a smaller slice of a pie that could exist forever, for 10 years potentially. So 1.5 million might not sound like much if we did like the LPL, but if you could get 5 years of that, that will be better than getting 3 million now and then in a year nothing if it all goes bust and your team fires you. And also, by the way, if teams start going bust, they will be incentivized to break contracts, to bench you, to invoke clause, to do everything they can to not pay. And they won't re-up either. Even if you have all that success, they won't re-up. So the practicality is what almost necessitates this. Then on the whole Faker goes to the LPL thing. The problem is, until we know the number, Faker might well go to the LPL. He wants one last year and loads of money. In fact, that's the reason why I don't like, this is what I do hate. I don't like this part where what the orgs do is they want their cake and to eat it at the same time. So we're going to put a salary cap. Oh yeah, but the rich, the really powerful orgs like T1 and all them, like we want special accommodations just for us though. Oh no, but the thing is the rules would apply to everyone. Oh, sorry, Kwangdong Freaks. Do you not have players with 5 championships or who won? Oh, well, sorry. I guess you just have to pay all the same amount of money, right? But I can then pay a bit extra. So I keep Faker. So even if you come with the same money, salary cap, we can all just make the same bid. No, I can always bid more than you. That's just, I hate grandfathering in general because all it does is it rewards those who have and punishes those who do not. Whereas the point of the salary cap as well, this is why owners do this, Monty. Salary cap is supposed to help you keep your finances down. But here's the problem when you keep your finances down. You actually have to be as good at me as GMing now. What if you're GMing and you're T1, but you're a bomb and you're hiring fucking Cos and fucking random ass Morgan or whoever. But then I go and I'm Kwangdong Freaks. I'm nobody, but I got CV Max. And he goes, you know what? I've got the next shit hot ADC and I'm getting keen to join and Kanavi's coming back. What do you want to join my team? I can pay you the same as T1. Oh, wait, I can't because T1 can pay you extra because they have the grandfathered clause. So I hate that in general. I think it's just so slimy. It's like on the one hand, stable, competitive field, everyone, except we get extra ones. And then the one there of like, you want more championships, right? This is one thing that's mental. This is only Koreans would think this makes sense because they're acting like it was your duty to succeed and win championships. And that in doing so, you've like furthered the LCK, right? No, you just played very good video games in a league. Like, here's the obvious thing about that that's stupid. That means that if fucking Chovy wants to sign a big deal, he can't sign as big a deal as Faker, even though Chovy is better than Faker. That is stupid as fuck. That is actually anti-competitive. And then lastly, just a last parting shot on the way out. I've finished off with the machine gun, throwing the grenades. A little bit of pistol on the way out the door. I'll just say this. The Journalist of the Year is endemic to the Korean scene. And their response to all this was to just ask, like, as if in a room, like, well, why is there no player union and why is there not all this? Like, one, if an American guy in this scenario, it's not what you call him, like fucking gauging is having to explain it to you, you've already failed. There's your job as an embedded journalist in Korea. And then two, crazy idea for Journalist of the Year. Do some fucking journalism. How about actually ask those questions of people who know publicly or privately and you find out and they tell you what you do when you find out because you think it's relevant. Tell us. Fucking tell us. Give me a fucking break, mate. Anyway, there you go. Little download for you.
So, sorry, to some of your points, they did actually um, start the process of this last year. So for those of you who have forgotten, they did do a bunch of shenanigans about rookies that we complained about last year. And so I think one of the things, to your point about CV Max and developing players, there are now I shouldn't say now, there are going to be in 2024 rookie development clauses, which means that basically there are 2-year extensions on a rookie player that their original team can have with certain built-in guarantees of salary increases. So effectively, now I don't like this for a lot of the reasons that you stated, because the if they're getting paid like league minimum, a 20% salary increase is not very much. And so you could
I
be
mean,
in
use the same analogy. That means Prime Faker in season 3 can never
yes.
earn what like an old like Rapid Star can earn, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we could make comparisons to the NFL, where obviously, like a lot of these like quarterbacks who become breakout stars within their first 5 or 6 years when they're on their rookie contracts, are massively underpaid. Like obviously, people like Josh Allen and Mahomes were stupidly underpaid for their first few seasons, which allowed them to kind of build superstar rosters around them to take serious stabs at winning championships. And when the payday comes in, it's often hard to maintain a roster of the level that's necessary to win a Super Bowl. So I'm not arguing that people should be underpaid, but I'm just saying there are parallels into other sports about rookie contracts and rookie clauses. But the rookie development clause was intended because what was happening was that teams would develop these players and then they would leave the roster or leave for another region, which obviously is their prerogative in order to get more money. But it was very difficult for them to, for teams to maintain the players they had developed. And for example, Guangdong Freaks, who has CV Max right now, that becomes a big deal because Guangdong is developing these players. Guangdong is looking better kind of week after week that these players are performing within the LCK, and potentially they might want to hold this roster together at a lower price point, for at least a couple years into the future.
By the way, when they say that though, that's again, we're right in the Korean paradigm and you must accept all their premises for that to make sense. By the way, if you accept all of someone's starting premises, as long as they're not mental, what they say will logically make sense usually. Yep. So here's the problem with that. That word there, developed, has just done so much heavy lifting and so many assumptions are built into it. So now every player who joins an LCK team and just plays for them for a year, Monty, actually the reason they're really good now is because they were developed by playing on that team. Like there's teams with trash coaches. There's teams that don't even understand your role. There's teams that inhibit you. Sometimes you play worse in teams, but no, that will all be counted as you being developed. Like basically, I'll use the same analogy. It turns out, guys, that it wasn't actually that Faker was the GOAT right out the gate in season 3. He was developed by Korma. Korma developed Faker's ability. Therefore, Korma should get to, like, what are you talking? You know what I mean? Like, this is the same thing again. Only Koreans would think that way, where essentially, if you don't know how companies work in Korea, your boss just by default takes credit for everything you did because he's your boss and he told you to do it. Like, there's never any individualism of like, you were a genius and an outsider and a thinker. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Your boss did it all. So I don't hate it all because, again, if you ask what the outcome is, the idea is this is why you would essentially like gamble on younger talent and potentially give them a chance, because then you get like more on the back end. What's happening is essentially more people might get a contract, which means they get into the league, but it's just that essentially what will cost them is it'll take them longer to get the star money potentially because you develop them in your org. And it also means in theory, you won't just pointlessly sign like semi-washed players for higher amounts. Like it might actually increase turnover of good players. So there's good and bad to it. Just as usual, it's all portrayed as just good for everyone. I mean, which, as I pointed out on Force, there's no such thing as good for everyone, is there?
I was pretty. This happened a year ago, by the way, almost exactly, that this announcement was made about the rookie stuff.
We talked about Insight.
Yeah, we talked about it on Insight. Talked about the Monte Wolf show. I was pretty against this because I think it unfairly caps the rookie salaries, right? And there's also
this, Monty, in sports, if you did join when you're 19, those first 3 years, it's unlikely that you're actually Patrick Holmes. That's a very rare example.
Sure.
The problem in esports is you absolutely can be your absolute peak in the first 2 years. It's very easy. A career is too short. So I almost feel like the scale is what's off with that. If it was like it only applied like to a split or the first 2 split, maybe that's okay. But I feel like the problem is they're treating it like it is. You're going to play 20 years in the NHL or something,
Yeah, and the other issue too is that there is basically a right of first refusal as well. So a team can kind of designate a franchise. This is from last year, guys. It's not new information, but a team can designate basically a franchise player every year that is going to be a free agent. And when they go into the market, the team that is currently has a contract with them has the chance to basically have a right of first refusal. So as they're going around and shopping for offers, the team so like if Faker at the end of this year goes around and shops for offers, T1 could designate him, and then he could come back and say, look, I have this contract offer from this team in China, and T1 could say, okay, well, we have now have a chance to match this offer. And if that player decides to leave, the team they go to has to pay a transfer fee. So it's basically holding players hostage. I mean, I don't know how else to say this. Like there is a hostage negotiation happening, and you have to pay out the hostage fee if you're a team. And this also counts if they're moving regions. So Chinese teams, NA teams would have to pay the original team in order to take the designated player away.
Which again, like, first of all, they had something just as worse than this in StarCraft. In StarCraft, you actually had to like do something mad, like pay the original salary and then like what you were going to offer the person in order to get like GenG to join your team, because GenG was the famous one when Hwasong Oz died or whatever. So like there's been some ridiculous ones like that. So this is also just the Korean way of doing it. You know, it's essentially, without saying it, they treat it like, right, I found him, so everything he did's mine and I own him. So if you want my chattel, you have to pay me for
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
So, but you just need a free contract. Free contract. There is no such
Right.
thing as a free contract. Give me a break.
And it's just a team designating this player in this fashion, right? And so let's just provide an example for you guys of how this might work. So Faker goes away and he says, I'm going to test the market. And he gets a $5 million offer from a Chinese team. He has to then take that offer back if he's been designated by T1. T1 says, okay, we'll pay you $5 million. Now, Faker can leave T1, but the Chinese team that wants him will then have to pay a percentage. I believe it's a percentage of the contract as a transfer fee. So it effectively gives a competitive advantage to T1 in order to keep the player, because they will pay less for his services than the exterior team will. And if he leaves, they actually just get paid straight up cash for him leaving the team, as long as they're making a competitive offer for him.
Also, think about what they were building in when that deal was done, before maybe all the salary caps came in. What they were doing there, Monty, is the crazier your offer, the more I make. So actually, even though it should fuck me that you come in like Saudi in football and go, I'll pay you 20 times more. Oh, go for it. You might be paying me 2 million then, just for getting the player that is not even my player anymore. You know, like that's essentially what you're doing there. You're sort of actually making it that if China did do the 20 million for Faker, you will get even more percentage of it, because the percent will be at that, but it'll scale up on it. You'll get way higher amounts, even though you did nothing.
Yeah. And the final part of the new information about the LCK salary cap is they're moving to what the LPL has, which is a luxury tax for teams that go above the cap. So what this means,
idea.
you can overspend the cap, but that money, which is very similar to the way that some American sports work, that money then gets distributed amongst the teams under the cap. So let's say I want to have a superstar roster and I'm going to pay $2 million above the cap. That $2 million then gets distributed amongst the other 9 teams if all of those teams are below the cap, or however many teams are below the cap or at the cap, I would assume. So this just means
from it, but yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. And by the way, this is what's happening in China right now. Like, as we've said on this show, GDG is paying approximately $16 million for their roster this year. They're basically funding, the rest of the LPL to a certain degree. I'm not sure how much above the cap they are, but if you think about it, and yeah, there are
I think
17...
each player can only be 1.5 million now, and some of them might be grandfathered in. So I'm going to guess it's millions and millions potentially.
Yeah. So, I mean, and probably some of the other teams are above the cap also.
Sure.
But so if it's 1.5, then they have 7.5, right?
And then we don't know what the tax is, but it's probably going to be millions in tax as well. Yeah.
Right. So it's probably like around $8.5 million in luxury cap tax potentially if they're that much above the cap. So who knows how that converts to what they have to pay the other teams? I doubt it's like dollar for dollar. Like if they're 8 million.
That's the thing. It depends if the original statement it counted that in, because if the original statement that they're paying that much counted the luxury tax, then maybe it's actually like they did like 4 million above, but they have to pay 2 million of the extra. You know what I mean? As the luxury, therefore the total amount would be this. If you don't know, basically, this is how the most famous example is how the Lakers operate in basketball every time they think they can win a championship. When they think they can win a championship, you spend a bit extra for that one extra player or the keeper player that keeps you at the top level. And what you say is, well, I'm LA and I've got all these deals. I've got $1 billion deal with like the local sports network and stuff. And basically I can outside fund it. And as you're saying, then a team in the middle of nowhere could be like the Milwaukee Bucks. They get a cut of that. So even though they can't directly compete with the Lakers, they financially potentially stay afloat from that. So it's kind of a give and take. This is why actually this one I don't mind. It allows you some wiggle room if you are actually smart enough with business outside the game. But in a way, the key thing here is, just like in the example of the Bucks, they weren't ever going to go mad above their luxury tax. In the same way as like Guangdong Freaks aren't ever going to pay all the max salary caps for all the players. So what's going to happen in theory is, it just means when people like T1 do what T1 things, or Dam1, then you just mean that if you are Guangdong Freaks, you actually just benefit a bit financially. Maybe helps your org actually do better and stay alive.
Yeah.
I think them anyway, probably.
I do wonder why last year the rookie development stuff was announced, and then this year the salary cap was announced instead of this all being announced at the same time, because they're two interlocking pieces to the same puzzle, and it does help create an entire picture of that ecosystem that we kind of lacked at the end of last year. Because at the end of last year, it just felt like a gimme to the lower ranked teams who wanted to lock rookie players in multi-year deals, basically with very small, 20% sounds like a lot, but if you're making $50,000 a year, that's really only moving you to $60,000 a year, which if you're a superstar level player is kind of ridiculous.
The analogy is like you say, the NFL is the best one. The real reason why people so ruthlessly cycle out quarterbacks and then draft quarterbacks is not because they really believe the number 2 pick is going to be Peyton Manning. It's because if you just have like Kirk Cousins, you're probably not going to win the NFL. So what you do instead is, he's going to cost a lot of money now as well at this point in his career. Instead, what you do is you just take gamble shots that eventually you do get like the next Lamar Jackson type character, and maybe he can be the transformation. So basically, it's a similar thing here. Is what they, in theory, it looked like we're incentivizing is, if you're a lower level team, like I say, you don't sign Kuro on a bad year when he's not good anymore and have to pay quite a lot. What you do is you gamble and see if you get the next Chovy or you have the next like star that's coming through. And so that almost made sense. I mean, the problem with it is though, when fans don't know this, they really do think in the NFL, like all these guys are bomb. Like the best example is like Andy Dalton. If we just went on pure merit and there was no salary cap and none of this shit and rookie contracts, dude, Andy Dalton would probably be a starter his whole career. He's just like an average quarterback that can get it done. But he's never going to be your super stud quarterback. So you're always going to gamble. That's why they just bring him in, if you notice, when someone gets injured or as the backup. That's why you gamble that you're going to go and get the next stud guy. And if you don't, you throw him away and you go again, because you can actually pay so little when you do get him that it's sort of worth risking a few years of your company. Because like you're saying, when you are Patrick Mahomes and 2 years in, you're amazing. It doesn't matter. There's not even a way they could give you more money, except if they did the like bullshit like signing bonus next time or something. But aside from that, it's actually not impossible to even make as much as like Aaron Rodgers does, even if you are Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and also I think you did have a good point, which is that sports contracts are not commensurate with the value that you're bringing to the team. So a lot of these athletes have to go do outside endorsement deals, which is oftentimes where they're making even more money than their contracts. I think probably LeBron makes more money from endorsements by a long shot than he does from
Michael Jordan
his
is the highest. Salary. Michael Jordan is the highest earning athlete in the world, and he hasn't played a game of basketball since 2003 because he makes all the money off Nike and all the money off the other shit and cigars and fucking Hanes. Well, here's the problem, Monty. That's where also this is more unfair than the NBA, because in the NBA you can go and get whatever shoe deal you want, and you can get all this lifestyle stuff. In the LCK you can't, because your team's probably sponsored by a headset company. The whole thing is they've already taken your likeness rights and they've got your salary cap. So here's the thing. The pros of this. the scene is in really bad shape, like Monty says. If even LCK teams might lead, spoiler, they weren't exploiting people because they couldn't exploit people in that scenario. They can't even pay to keep the company alive. So if the league's going to die, that's not good for anyone. So I don't mind this as like a stopgap measure, and who knows, maybe in the end, because here's the other thing. If you do it right, if it ever stabilizes and becomes a real business, you could also raise all these levels.
Sure, yeah.
You could double and triple the salary caps. And if, for example, you had a generation that still was going to the LPL, you could all collectively get together with Kesper and go, maybe we want to double the salary cap to match what China's doing. You could still do some things like that. It doesn't have to be this way forever. The one downside I'll say is this. This is where, like everything in esports, the number one piece of advice is this. Never act as though something is going to happen because it was promised or it was possible. And the reason I say that is this. I know a lot of players in the EU leagues, Monty, who kept telling me for years, oh, when I'm washed, I'll go to LCS. Too late. You missed the boat. The time to go and get all those millions is gone. It's going to be the same for LCK. Faker, it is implied, at least tests the waters. Well, now there is no 20 million for you, Faker. Like, even the LPL can't pay you 20 million, mate. So now there is no point going for the 20 mil. If there ever was 20 mil, that has been and gone. So this is why esports is never on. It's always building a house on the sand. You're always potentially, everything can get washed away tomorrow.
Well, my other problem with this, Thorin, and to your point about the salary cap being raised with a successful business, well, the way that it works in American sports, where there has been a players' union negotiating against the actual league, has been that usually the salary cap is calculated as a percentage by team of revenue of the league, right? So the players' union says, okay, guys, you have to pay. Here's a number, 50% of the revenue of the NFL to players. I'm not sure if that's the exact percentage. It's just an example. And so then the salary cap is calculated based off of that, divided out by teams, right? And what this means is there's a guaranteed amount of the total revenue of the business of the NFL that is going directly into the players' pockets. This is why you need, as I understand it, a players' union to negotiate a salary cap scenario within the United States to not run afoul of antitrust laws, although we'd have to probably, bring back Harris Peskin to discuss this at this point in time, because that's more his area of expertise, obviously, than mine. And I know he's done a lot of legal research on it and is a lawyer. But this is all to say, like, as the revenues of LCK raise, that is where the salary cap might be able to change to represent a good amount of that percentage of revenue for the players. But as we've discussed, these League of Legends projects are unsustainable because the players, as you talked about in your video in the LCS, the least amount of money they made was 120% of revenue, right? So it's crazy. Yes. Like I like you're saying, I disagree with a lot of this stuff in principle, but the alternative is that the league dies. I mean, this is not sustainable for the teams, and the teams have been the ones who have been the most fucked in this process. But also, what I find kind of gross about this entire setup is that this is an abdication of responsibility from Riot. As I understand it, the LCK teams receive the lowest amount of revenue share from the LCK compared to all of the other major regions. As we've discussed, like, there's 2 million that the LCK. Yeah, well, the teams should do a walkout, right? Partly. Which is crazy because the LCK is a massively watched league. It is more watched than LCS. It's more watched than LEC. It's obviously not up at the Chinese levels. But the thing about Korea is that it is a fully developed first world country. So why can't the LCK team sell sponsorships at the same level? Here's a wacky idea for you, Thorin. You know that giant English stream that probably gets more, it doesn't probably, gets more viewership than the LCS? The English stream of LCK gets more viewership than LCS? How do they have no global sponsors? How the fuck is that possible? They're not, I mean, I'll answer it. They have nobody selling it. They have nobody selling it to the West. They're not represented by agencies in America. You could absolutely sell this, and they're not doing it. The operations of the LCK are trash. They have a ghost commissioner. They're not doing a good job in sales. They're not activating all the revenue streams that they could, especially on the global side. And therefore, they can't revenue share with the teams. It is a badly run business. And Riot is going to try and scoot away from all of this responsibility by just saying, okay, we solved it for you guys. Or capping your spending. We're making it cheaper for you to get rookies. But Riot's not addressing their fault, which is an inability to generate money for the ecosystem, for the teams. Now, they generate tons of money for themselves. There's no way that you can't tell me that Riot doesn't make a shit ton of money from selling skins because of esports in Korea. Because everyone watches esports in Korea. It's not like in the West where it's a very small percentage of people. If you play League of Legends, which is still at what I'm going to look right now, 50%,
top 3, and
50% or more in PC bongs. I'm just going to look right now.
Also, remember, in theory, you might be more incentivized to buy skins because you have all the champions unlocked. So
yeah,
you don't even have to own the champion.
Exactly. If you played a PC bong, you have all the champions unlocked. Okay, 36% of the games in PC bongs right now are League of Legends. And probably a lot of those people, the majority of those people, watch esports. If you log into the client in Korea, it is all esports on the front page of the client every single time. Schedules for the LCK, content with players. It is way more watched by percentage of the player base. So they must know that they are getting insane conversion when pro players use a skin and they sell a fuck ton of those skins. So Riot is neatly dodging their responsibility to the welfare of the league through their own actions, which is gross. Also, like, they need to do better and they need to do more in terms of getting the most out of the sales of the league and getting the most and actually being honest about the revenue they're generating from their microtransactions about esports in Korea.
I've also got a couple of other angles. Like, another reason why, if you're players, you really, really want longevity in League of Legends, specifically LCK if you're Korean, is because, one, if you're Korean, at least you get to live in Korea still. If your family is at all in Seoul, you can still, to some degree, potentially see your family sometime. If you go to China, that is like, to you, may as well be joining the Foreign Legion, mate. Like, forget about it. You're just going to come back years later with a beard, like, I've got some stories to tell. Like, except the joke is all the stories would be like, the air quality and the food was oily. Like, it was like, all right, mate, okay, that's your complaint. But the problem here is this: a lot of people don't know this. In Korea, this is why that documentary we recommended called State of Play about Korean StarCraft is so good. Esports is your last chance saloon. By the time you are good enough to become pro and go through the team house system and the practice partner and climb the ladder, by the time you've done that, you've basically given up on life. You aren't going to school anymore. You aren't doing a part-time job. You aren't even having a social life anymore. You have essentially become an alienated figure who must succeed in your given esport. You probably can't even pivot now and become a top in another esport. You better just be good at the one you went into, whether that was StarCraft back in the day, League of Legends now, Overwatch, HOTS, whatever it is. And if you don't, that's why I can tell you the saddest shit of all time is when a Korean scene dies. So people don't know, years before those Westerners ever got good in StarCraft 2, the Korean scene was effectively dead. All the big orgs had pulled out. There was almost no one there. That's why people like Jin Air, even Sting, was like a big marketing thing for them, that they sort of even cared about StarCraft still. And what would happen was, loads of the pro players play to this day, Monty. There are people from 2013 who were like the fourth best player on Slayers playing now in GSL, just hoping to win some of the prize money and getting like very low salaries or getting like shitty money from like that streaming thing where you get like given the fucking bubbles and they're worth a bit of money or whatever. Like, they're doing anything they can. And I'll tell you right now, some of those guys who were like GSL champions ended up sponsored by like the 89th biggest esports org in Europe, for example. People you've never even heard of, out countries you've never heard of. And look at League of Legends. What happens when you're not a top pro anymore is you're now playing in the LGL in Japan. Now you're playing in the VCS in Vietnam. You're playing in Brazil. You're just playing anywhere that will take you because your whole life is be good at League of Legends. You've dedicated too many years. So unfortunately, there is no contingency for most Korean players. There's no plan B. Like, it's just this or nothing. So I can tell you, for a lot of them, you don't want this league to go bust in 2 years, no matter what you make now. You want it to last as long as possible so that you don't have to be 28 years old, never had a job, never had a girlfriend, never experienced more of a social life, just got good at a video game, and it's sort of over. Because like I tell you, they'll hang around till the absolute end and just be spat out the bottom of the industry. It's so tragic to see. And then the other thing I'll just throw in there is, This is something, if you are Dom and you are LS, you won't want me to say, but not like those jokes I normally say. This is actually something that really could harm your career. I shouldn't say this in theory if I like those guys, but I'm too legit. Technically, Monty's right. If you know what people like ESL do, where they let you co-stream their thing, or you can co-stream, but you're putting my sponsors on your broadcast, as in putting them onto the stream. You might even have to play a pre-roll or a mid-roll when I tell you to between the games. If I was LCK, look, this is bad for Dom and LS. They want their own sponsors, mate. They just want the feed, and then they want to put all their shit around it. But I would actually, if I were them, like you say, especially those crazy numbers for that last finals in English, were like, it was like as much as the Koreans team, bro, for the finals. If I were them, I would be saying, look, we're going to have someone who knows what they're doing sell Western sponsors, and then they're going to go on your stream, bro. And here's the bad news. If they conflict with your current sponsor, then either do you want to co-stream or do you want to live view and have your sponsor? Because if you want to co-stream, you're putting mine on, and I have my sectors that I'm going to sell, I'm afraid. And look, maybe there could be a back and forth and I pay you a cut of that, but at the same time, I don't have to actually. You need me, I don't need you as much. Keyword as much there.
I mean, that's coming. I mean, that's obviously coming. Yeah, because Riot's not just going to let people, I think, co-stream for free, especially, I mean, it's not really even about Dom or LS. It's about Valorant. It's about Valorant and 80% of the viewership being on co-streams, where Riot is paying for all of the production fees that go onto the feeds that are on these streams that people like Tarek have. And at a certain point in time, they are going to want money from that. It's inevitable. I think the teams are going to pressure them as well in order to actually properly monetize that. And it shouldn't be just the individual co-streamers that are making all of that money. But it is crazy how hard LCK has completely dropped the ball with monetizing the English language content and the English language streams surrounding LCK.
There is no it though, mate, because think about it, right? They're used to still the StarCraft model, and in StarCraft, you had 2 actual TV channels that were paid for this shit and were doing. That was why the Kesper lawsuit happened, because they were the ones selling broadcast. Kesper was selling broadcast rights to StarCraft, to OGN and NBC game. So that's all the old model. Basically, is what football is now. You use the TV broadcast rights, and then secondly, the reason why they deleted all those awesome fucking VODs off the internet for Westerners is because they don't get that there's a foreign market. They're like, you're just stealing our content, take it down. Yep. So they've just essentially, Koreans aren't that good at understanding stuff outside of Korea. They're very insular. So I get why they've got to this point. It's very logical.
Sort of. If this was still an all Korean affair, I would agree with you, Thorin. But how do they have sales teams that can sell LEC and LCS to English language audiences and not just tap into those same sales teams for LCK? It's all part of one company, right? It's not like it's OGN or NBC game with limited connections to the West. Right? It's literally apply the LCS sales team, apply your English language sales teams or agencies to the selling of the LCK broadcast. There's no reason to have Korean banks that you can't even be a customer of sponsoring the English language broadcast. You should have an entirely separate, you should have an entirely separate stream, right? You should have entirely separate graphics. You should have, I don't know, the client in English on those instead of in Korean on these broadcasts. Can't be that hard to add a separate observer or something like that, or a separate client language.
I always thought it was dope when it was saying all the announcers, Pentakill. That's way sicker. We talk about
it's fun, but if we're being honest about like what would probably be the best, not my preference, but the best for the broadcast, and then also just have separate sponsors. You could pay for this thing. It would provide revenue for the teams. It's outrageous. Like when you see coverage of other sports that are not endemic to this country, like I've seen coverage of the NFL in the UK. They have their own sponsors for the NFL in the UK. Why can't you just do that with LCK? Why is there nobody capable of selling an LCK sponsorship? That is outrageous.
I mean, this is why Richard always gets mad at team owners, though, because what they do is they just do things their own way until they've lost all the money they pay to do a corner. Then they go, everyone's got to change everything so that I can keep doing business. It's like, well, have you ever thought of actually being innovative? Like maybe switch up what you're doing. Maybe what you're doing doesn't work. That's always the last thought you'll notice. In fact, the joke is, in their own way, the massive team orgs are like Riot. Riot's sort of like, hey, it's just all you guys need me. I don't need you. And the team orgs are like, hey, what would happen if we left? It's like, yeah, it sucked. But like at the end of the day, you are running a business, right? It's your business. If you made tens of billions, we wouldn't get a cut of it. So why do we have to help you now? But that's how they all do it, mate. They all have that mentality.
I mean, this is also where having OGN just made a lot of sense for esports in Korea, because OGN was owned by CJENM, which is a massive entertainment company that owns a bunch of other television stations and crucially owns K-pop. And if you are OGN, you can actually, what we used to do on LCK, not LCK, but the OGN streams, right? Champions Korea, was during breaks, they would play K-pop music videos. Now, this is good for OGN because they are exposing Westerners to other products owned by CJENM. So they actually can make money by doing advertisements of their own company's products that are available globally. But Korean banks, is that available globally? No. Does SK Telecom gain anything by advertising globally? No, they do not. There's no SK Telecom that you can sign up for as a phone service outside of Korea. Does KT gain anything? Nope. So to a certain degree, I think there are some BBQ chickens in the United States. I think there are actually some in LA.
There was. I ordered some when I came.
Yeah, but it's very limited. Like outside of Korea, we're talking about one city or one or two places on Earth where people could actually get value out of that. So it is just a massive dropping the ball by LCK in general, not to be properly monetizing or properly selling these global.
Oh, by the way, the other thing as well is this. Here's what will blow your minds. You've just heard all those negatives and how I've said it can be predatory, or they can actually, like, sometimes it fucks the player. You have to understand, the Korean team orgs will think they are being incredibly magnanimous with those contract offers because they know what the K-pop model is. The K-pop model is that times 1 million and you make fuck all and you're just like signed to like a slave contract basically. And when you start out, it's the same. Notice how all those assumptions come from K-pop, Monty. We found you. We developed you. We should own you. You can't just leave. You can't just live your life this way. You can only make this much. You're on a contract lasting this long. Doesn't matter how much your music makes. Doesn't matter how much we make off you. Like, essentially, compared to K-pop, it's paradise. This is like the dream to be a pro League of Legends player. So if you actually understand the cultural context, they actually probably think they're doing an awesome job with this and they're being really nice.
I'm sure.
And in a way, they are in context.
It's actually funny. All right. I don't have anything more to say about this topic.
Oh, obviously the joke is they were really concerned about what's called the Huna factor because they didn't want that bubble to pop, did they?
Also, they used to play that video. Okay. They used to play that video like nonstop on OGN. It was one of those K-pop videos from back in the day.
This is what's sad. This is based, but I'll be careful. Here's the thing. If you go watch that video now, you're going to go, this isn't that controversial because it's just a girl wearing like jeans, sort of mildly tilting her arse a bit. But you have to understand, that's how far the West has actually regressed in the last 5 years or whatever. That was considered really out there back then. Like, oh my God, like now that's nothing, is it? Like the joke is like, that's not even Instagram at this point in time, guys. That's how standards and norms have changed, isn't it?
That's true.
Because that used to be considered like a really, it's a bit racy.
Oh yeah, especially for Korea.
Yeah, of course.
All right. What do you want to talk about in terms of League of Legends topics? Any leagues that piqued your interest?
I've got some information for you because I teased this before, but now I can confirm it. So I just released my interview series with Aphromoo. And what do you know, guys? Just like I said, Svenskeren said he actually was at Season 4 Worlds. Monte came in before Samsung White won Worlds, which is what triggered everyone else to realise what vertical jungling is. And Monte was sort of like, hey, Svenskeren, maybe you should try this thing called vertical jungling. It probably changed your whole game. And he was like, what is blood waffling about? And then just went and played the game and was shit, right? Meanwhile, then Aphromoo, the same year, was coached by Monte. Remember that? Remember what I said? Not only did I say Aphromoo was a shot caller. No, yes, and everyone shot calls. Whole interview about how he's the shot caller and works at the ADC. But then I asked him in a very neutral way, what was Monte like in terms of a coach? And he says, Monte taught me macro and like how to set up the map and play the map. And you know that thing? Are you ready, guys? This is the best one of all. That shows you that Link was a petulant fucking cretin who himself didn't understand macro. Because you ready? You know when he said Monte didn't do anything, he just showed us some Civer comps like, bro, you just press R. No, The comps that he's referring to there was an era where only Monte's team knew this in the West, where if they go for Baron, because the towers didn't have all the resistances, you could just press R on Sivir, take the whole game in exchange for Baron. So it wasn't just play Sivir and press R in a team fight. It was essentially, if they go for Baron, the entire NA way of playing to this day, you just win the game because they don't know you can actually take the base. That's literally the shit Monte was doing. And then an arsehole like Reginald was like, he is just a pretend coach for the cameras. Then Reginald in like season 8, when Kaiser's out, like, dodge Kaiser Q play W or whatever it is. Like, no, give me a fucking break. That's what the clown show league is, mate. And Monte actually sadly held all this shit in and let these idiots just clown him. Like, it was the whole time. It was legit the whole time.
There wasn't really a point in bringing it up at the time because the whole end of the boot camp and like almost getting relegated was just so embarrassing.
Okay.
And, you know, I also just didn't, you know, at the end, when the dust settled, like, what was the point of bringing up that the players were not actually playing the picks that we had practiced during that boot camp? I was happy that they didn't get relegated. And as I said before, I was actually, so people think that I was kind of released from CLG. CLG actually asked me at the end of that to come and live with them and be a full-time head coach. I said no. And that would be for the 2015 season, and I stayed in Korea continuing to cast because I didn't want to make that shift in my career. But it wasn't that CLG was unhappy with me, and it wasn't that I hadn't been given an offer to continue coaching with the team. It was just very clear that having me as a remote coach, and I totally agree with this perspective, by the way, was not going to work. And 2015 also, the rules were changing in LCS. That was the first season where coaches could actually be on stage during draft and on headsets. And the reason why I couldn't control the draft for those relegation matches in 2014 was because there was no rule for a coach to be on stage. It was all the players had to do the draft. So you had to come up with all the draft scenarios, ensure that your players understood them and were able to adapt, and just like pray to God that it went okay. That's what actually happened at that era. So, you know, it was very clear that with changes to rules that every team was going to need in-person coaches. They also started offering stipends for coaches in 2015, where they previously hadn't actually had any kind of budget that Riot gave you to have a coach. So it was a really, really, really big difference between year to year, but I didn't want to go and become a full-time coach. But the offer was there.
But what pisses me off is the notion that, like, it's one thing if they say, I know nothing, Monte. I mean, even so, you'd think I'd pick something up talking to players for 10 years, etc. But let's imagine I know nothing. The joke now is these nephews are so out of control, no one knows anything, mate. The only people that know anything is if they're like Cadril knows everything, but everyone else knows nothing. If they're like LS knows everything, but everyone else knows nothing. Like, it's one thing if you're trying to tell me I don't know League of Legends. Like, the idea Monte doesn't, and he's a moron because he went to Overwatch for 2 years. It just doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, the fundamentals of the game never change.
Yeah. You know, to be fair, I think League of Legends has changed quite a lot over the years. And it's, you know, the current iteration is not my favorite iteration of what the game has been in the past. But yeah, I think a lot of the fundamentals still remain the same. And I do have a wealth of knowledge.
Dude, your original meme that everyone said about you, the two memes were rotations and win conditions, right?
Yep.
Those to this day are still poorly executed by a lot of pro teams, especially in the West. To this day, they don't know those concepts.
Yeah. It's really interesting to hear from Aphromoo. I mean, I think Aphromoo did do a really good job of stepping into a leadership role and becoming a shot caller, and something that I worked on really quite a lot with him one-on-one.
I'll give you a banger. Do you want to know what the Reddit consensus is about Aphromoo? You know the split, he went to 100 Thieves and he won the MVP. By the way, first support player to ever win the MVP. Later, CoreJJ did it, but Aphromoo did it first. The Reddit consensus is that was just like a popularity contest win because he was Aphromoo, and actually it should have gone to, I don't know, Bjergsen, whoever, right? Here's what's hilarious. When I ask Aphromoo, what do you think of people discrediting it? Go listen to his reasons, guys. They are bangers. He was so cracked out as both a lane support and like a leader that he was doing shit, Monty, like first pick Braum. and literally let the other team have counter pick against him, knowing that allows him to do whatever that's how good he was. So the joke was, like, he made him a very compelling case. I remember when he made his points going like, fucking hell, this is different from what Reddit thinks. So it's the other way around, nephews. You don't know League of Legends. What do you know? What do you think about that, dickhead? Oh, and are you ready for the cream of the crop? By the way, it's 2 hours long. Don't worry, I'm not blowing all the load here. There's loads of other shit. I'll just drop this one in. There's loads of great shit aside. I'll give you 2 freebies. One, this is Doublelift's understanding of the game. Do you know why Doublelift wanted Xmithy to join CLG? Because when they did a tryout, you know when you go in as Jarvan and do like the EQ combo, whatever it is, right? When you do that, Doublelift, because he plays in NA, had only ever seen it done aggressively. So, Xmithy, are you ready? Get ready for your mind to fucking Oppenheimer, motherfucker. When Doublelift saw Xmithy dive a tower and do the combo out, Doublelift just like, we gotta sign him. That alone, that was all he needed. And then here's the little freebie for you. Oh, what was the other one I was going to give you? There's one more I was going to. Oh, here we go. This is so delicious. You'd think I set this up. You'd think I talked to Afro. Like, listen, Afro, I'm doing you a favor, so quid pro quo. You got to say this at minute 48. Here's what Aphromoo says when you remember when he was in Dignitas, Monty? Do you remember there was a Danish mid laner that I'm a fan of? Do you remember that guy who played Froggen? His name was, yeah. But remember, that was 2020, Monty. Froggen wasn't good since season 2. When I ask Aphromoo what it was like to play in this team, I don't even say like what it was like to play with Froggen. He just says he really liked playing with Froggen, and that even in 2020, Froggen would just pick Karthus into LeBlanc. Karthus isn't even a mid lane champion then, Monty, and win the matchup. And he said Froggen could basically play everything.
Yep.
Need I say more? There you go. There's lots more gems like that. By the way, it's actually an amazing interview because Afro is one of those people who wasn't very open. I know he did interviews with Travis. He didn't drop these gems before. He dropped so many gems in here. I never expected it to be like, it's actually like, I could have done like 10 different titles.
Afro is very smart. And also he's kind of like low-key hilarious too. He's very dry and understated in his humor, but he's got a good sense of humor. I really enjoyed working with him. I like him a lot as a person, so it's fun to be able to hear that his reflections in those interviews now because of his wealth of experience. And also I think people will underrate Aphromoo because he was a streaky player. You know, his highs were really high, but sometimes he would just AFK for an entire split and look pretty poor. But when he was kind of riding the hot hand, it was really special, I think, in the LCS. And that's why, especially on some of these rosters like FlyQuest that he was on, or Dignitas, he would massively overperform expectations a lot of the time. And then he would kind of turn into a pumpkin for a split, but then he'd get back on. And I always really enjoyed the heaters that he would go on because he would definitely be at times like the best support in the LCS.
I thought he was mega, mate. Like, if you just go back, the most underrated accomplishment ever is the lineup of rookies. Remember, Stixate and Huhi were rookie, and he took them to the MSI final and beat T1 in a BO1 game. Like, what more do you want? Or is he supposed to just win MSI as well? Fucking hell. That's cracked out, mate. And he beat Doublelift and Bjergsen in the fucking LCS. Yes. Dude, that one, 3-month span, I actually wrote an article at the time where I said he's the most valuable player in the LCS. He's just the player you'd sign, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually really surprised that he was kind of left out of the current cycle of players.
He said he retired.
He voluntarily retired?
Yeah, he was sick of it. Here's the thing, that he was just sick of living in team houses for 10 years. And also, one thing you'll find out in the interview is actually he was a bit too accommodating. Look, as a captain, he made the decisions, but he never sort of forced his way and made players be signed or not signed. And also, he was way too loyal to certain orgs. He could have been in Team Liquid with Doublelift. He could have gone to a bunch of he could have been in Cloud9 when they had the cracked out original lineup. The problem he had was he sort of was too loyal for too long. And then in doing so, let his stock drop. And then some of those latter lineups, they were just badly managed. If you look at when he was in FlyQuest and fucking Dignitas, these were just badly managed teams, if you remember. So the real sad thing is, I actually do feel like he probably could still play. Apparently he had offers, but I also feel like he just blew the last half of his career because he was just, that's the issue, is there hasn't been very good GMing in a lot of orgs. If you're a player, you actually have to do the NBA thing like Perks does. You have to get yours. You have to figure out a way to get the way you want to be and with who you want to play with, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I do hope that after he takes this break that he considers coaching. Because I think he's a player who could actually make that transition.
I do say, do you want to be a coach? He says, well, essentially, I was coaching all the teams I was in.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So
That's what I mean.
I didn't mean I did that. You
know? That's funny. Yeah, I think right now, if we want to transition into at least a little bit of LCS talk, I mean, where do you want to start? Like EG being exposed, Cloud9.
Take has definitely died off. I even thought it for a while. When LEC was looking really sus, I remember it was one of the only times I ever did this where I actually thought, you know what, maybe Cloud9 is the best Western team. That ship has sailed. That ship. Mate, it's going over the horizon already. I could barely see it at this point in time. It's like, what, you guys going to find America? See ya. The joke is someone needs to find America. It's fucking dying, mate. Like, this is terrible. What's going on? Like, dude, even Cloud9, what they're supposed to do now, remember, the excuse you're supposed to give me is this, Monty. When they don't perform at Worlds, you're supposed to go, well, what could you do? You were stomping NA, so you couldn't level up. Bro, you're not even stomping now. If people don't know, you're going to look at the table and go, no, they've got 11 wins. Like, right, that's one more than Golden Guardians and two more than EG and Team Liquid. And EG and Team Liquid aren't good teams. And you've lost a gang of those games recently. Like the last, remember, the LCS still has the week. It's not like a week 1 into week 2 groups like LEC. The dominant Cloud9 at this point in time is the first half of the split. It's actually looking really dodgy this last half. And quite frankly, they're probably going to lose a couple more games, Monty. They might lose another game before the end.
Yeah, and they only really have to make top 2, and they're pretty secure in that top 2 right now.
They still win the league, but it's just the way they're doing it so underwhelming, isn't it?
Let me put it this way. M&S ain't going to be on Cloud9 next year. You guys love to get hyped about M&S. You were loving it as they made the transition from Diplex in the spring split. He's not good enough. He's not good enough for this team. Remember, Cloud9 won the league in summer last year, and they still cut Jensen.
Yeah, because they had a boy called Jensen. Remember, how did it work out for Team Liquid cutting Jensen? All right. Then he goes to Cloud9, wins a championship. Cut him. How did that work out? Exactly. Tell you what, I know he probably asks for a lot of money, but he's still good in Dignitas, mate. He's not even a bad player there.
I mean, Cloud9 did win spring as well, to be fair, after they cut Jensen. But
okay. And what did he do internationally? Because my boy was going to MSI finals, top 4 at Worlds. The joke is Jensen single-handedly has done more than every other NA org.
Sure. Yeah, it was probably just a money thing, honestly.
It was. As far as I know, they didn't want to pay, like, I imagine he wanted a very healthy set. If people don't know, he doesn't stay in LCS just because he likes America. It's because he can get paid way more than he will in LEC. So to people like him, it's like, why would I ever go back to LEC? I think it's the same for Svenska. And also they want like the green card and all that shit, don't they? And to just have different work conditions.
And also it really hasn't just been M&S that's been underwhelming. Fudge has been pretty underwhelming as well, but they're not going to change out Fudge because Fudge counts as a domestic player, guys. So why would you change out Fudge? He's not bad enough that you would replace him with anybody. I would argue maybe you could replace him with a player like Revenge, but I don't think it's a massive upgrade by any means. So you are going to keep Fudge 100%. Because that just allows you to keep Berserker and open up your mid laner as an import slot, right?
I give props to Fudge in one area. One, he successfully finagled the LS sweet spot. And the reason it's the sweet spot is this, Monty. Oh, he doesn't just do all the stuff LS says, but he seems like he does enough and he agrees with enough that if you're an LS fan, you're just on his side automatically. You think, oh, he's doing LS shit. Then secondly, even though, by the way, spoiler, anyone perhaps he was one of the players that also wanted him. What? Who said that? Like, whoever said that, get out of the room now.
No, nobody
said that. That is an outrageous rumor, and I would never drop a gem like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, like, whoever that voice I projected would have said that in a hypothetical game in Minecraft on Twitch TV. The other thing is this. The other thing he does very well, I'm not joking, I actually think this is 50% of why he never gets called out. He just does really good interviews with Travis, and he absolutely fucking knocks it out the park. All the fans love him. And so as a result, they do their best to see his perspective. So there'll never be a Fudge accountability thread. It will never exist. He'll be downvoted and he will always be loved because he's a very amiable figure as far as I can tell. Yeah. But as a player, a bit overrated most of his career.
He's also the same way in terms of his presence in scrims. He's not one of those players that looks really good to the fans and might be kind of a diva on the inside. At least when I've watched him scrim or been around him within the Cloud9 team house, he's been, extremely nice, extremely courteous, extremely polite, super likable person, very good teammates as far as I can tell. So there haven't been any personality issues that I would have detected within those times. And I think that's another reason why he keeps on. I mean, he is the face with Blabber, more or less, of Cloud9 right now. And at least with C9, you can look at Blabber and Berserker and say these guys are crazy hard carrying this team. Crazy hard carrying this team.
I mean, if he's the face of Cloud9, then they have a face like a slapped ass.
Hey,
look up what that means.
The
joke there is obviously the faces of those two masks out of Greek theatre. There's comedy and tragedy, comedy with Blabbo for the ints, and then tragedy with Fudge naturally. There you go.
I think Blabber and Berserker have been doing an excellent job on this roster, and Blabber, I think, is probably on his way to another MVP within the LCS. And it's just a matter of getting a better mid laner. Well, if this team had a more stable mid laner who didn't randomly int in some of these games, they might actually be in some level of conversation. Probably not with the current form of G2, which actually looks quite good. But they might be in some conversation for second best team in the West.
And the other thing about that is, mate, I actually think a lot of the mid laners have been pretty whack this LCS split. It's why when people like Insanity came in and had some good games for TSM, it's blown people's minds. When people like fucking Gory perform, it's like, wow, like the actual level of mid lane's not that elite. Like I think people took for granted in general, Monty. This is why I said you'll never replace Double F, Bjergsen and Jensen. Those were the keys to the league. Because not only were they massive brands that were fan favorites, they were just really good, consistent players. Like every year they're going to be either at an international level or just below. Well, I tell you what, when Jensen's on a bad team, when Bjergsen's retired, and when Double F's just sort of phoning it in, all of a sudden the level of the league just drops. And it's only 3 players you had to change the circumstances of, but those 3 players, they were carrying the league with how excellent they were.
Yeah. Yep. And I guess we don't really have replacements for those players yet that are at that level internationally. I guess Jojo Pian has been at times and might still be, but the rest of his team is really just letting him down at the moment. And as people have shown, as people have said, Evil Genius is kind of a fraud team. They go 0-3 this past week. If you focus down Jojo Pian and he's not getting these early lane leads, they look like a team that really struggles.
I think my problem though. I also think NA GMs are terrible at importing EU players. Like, dude, everyone remembers how good earlier this year Leader was on Astralis, right? Dude, they could have been in the playoffs last split. Leader was on Golden Guardian's academy team. Couldn't get into the LCS. Bro, you had him there. You realize, just like when they used to have Jizuke, mate, these players are perfect for the LCS. They're all about pop-off action, solo kills, roam on the map with assassins. Like, these are the guys you want in LCS. But if you have those guys there, like they're Unforgiven, you're just sitting on a bench, like, what are you doing? Like, that means in that scenario, it's like you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. Like, bro, you're just surrounded by water and the whole LCS, like, a bit dry. On mouth. It's like, just fucking drink. Just drink.
I think you're right too, especially because a player like Leader, if you build the team properly, I think probably can win in the LCS. Yeah. You can play weird ass picks in the LCS, and if you're good enough at them, the teams aren't good enough at macro to punish the reasons why those picks are weird. Look at Insanity. I mean, Insanity is a great example of this in this split. Nobody else is playing the fucking Graves mid like he is. There's a bunch of niche picks that are coming out. Look at APA. Now, I think APA is a little bit different because Ziggs is more meta than a lot of people might think if you look around the world, although it's been primarily played in the bot lane. But fast pushing strategies are on the up and up. And I really, really, really like fast pushing strategies in this meta. I think they're very effective, and teams that master them are going to have an extra arrow in their quiver when it comes to kind of the upcoming meta for summer playoffs and for the world championships, as long as these champions remain viable. Because here's the thing, once we move Engage to supports, now, if we talk about the shape of the meta so far this year in League of Legends, a lot of the Engage duties have been done by mid laners, which is not a normal meta. And it's things that we have the Azir back now. Now, obviously, if you're building Crown Azir, you have a lot of durability in order to go in and engage. If you're building like Crown Zhonya's Azir, which we see a lot these days, Annie has been meta for quite some time, right? You've seen other more utility picks such as Everfrost Ahri coming in, or other Everfrost champions that have come into the meta, and these have really, really dominated professional play, and they've dominated strategies within the top teams. We look at KT right now, Twisted Fate, Talia. These are champions that they've used for great effect, and what they do is they provide hard engage. Even Nico, who is overwhelmingly popular in the LPL, is a champion that starts off many of these team fights. Even earlier this year, look, mid Cassante, dominant. This is another champion that provides a strong front line and possible engage possibilities. Gragas from Faker in the spring split. So now that we're moving away from enchanters and more towards engage supports, and this is also coupled with the fact that jungle has also been playing a lot of those engage duties, but now we're seeing Lee Sin come back. There's still Kindred. There's jungle carry possibilities. Of course, you can still play Sejuani or Maokai. Those are very powerful, but it allows you flexibility with your draft. Now you can play a lot of either poke champions in the mid lane, 80 poke champions. So we're seeing, now even, G2 is playing the Lucian, but Jace is actually one of the highest win rate champions across all major regions right now. Extremely powerful in the right hands. We're
Nook can play it. Enough said. Nook said. There you go.
Yeah. And so I think we're seeing this shift in the meta, and because you're seeing like a Jace in the mid lane, that means your AP has to go somewhere else. So that often means that we're seeing the Ziggs in the bot lane. But the combination of certain runes, when you have top laners that can easily kind of chew through towers, and then you have Ziggs Satchel Charge, which can get you a lot of plates or a lot of early objectives. You can really do a lot of damage very quickly and take a huge amount of gold on the map, especially through split pushing. And you can also clear waves extremely easily. So it allows you to get some really good incremental advantages in terms of gold, plates, tower, map presence. And Ziggs is really, really good at killing turrets. And turrets have gotten tougher over time. So having somebody who can just kind of blow through it with a satchel charge really easily is great. Or you have a lot of champions that are taking Demolish as a rune, especially in the top side, whether that's going to be a Jax or a Renekton or something like that, which enables you to kind of push advantages and take plates quickly, or enable a Jax split push. It's been really effective. So this is all to say, like, APA is a little bit different because I think he's kind of playing into a facet of the meta right now. And it's been Team Liquid has executed it well, and I think this is going to be more of a continuous strategy for many professional teams as we head into the rest of the split.
Mate, if he actually ends up being good, the obvious question is, why was he on a team? What's going on with these GMs?
Well, I think that's what's really crazy, Thorin. Harry has never been good. Okay? Like, I know I think they were reluctant to put APA in because
was there ever a reason they gave as to why Harry and Young have been so, like, why they covet them so much, why they built a whole team around? What was the reason why?
Korean.
No, but did they have did they think like secretly they cracked out and I've seen like them amazing in solo? Was there some special reason they gave? I've never really understood what the deal is myself.
I think that they thought they were rookies with potential, but they also fit into a Korean speaking roster. And I think they prioritized speaking Korean over potentially the best players. Now, I understand why, especially there were probably pressure from the players. If you're core JJ or Pioshik and you want to do the shot calling in Korean, you want to have players that can understand that. And from a player perspective, you probably think that your shot calling is better than the difference between, like, understanding shot calling in Korean is more important to your team's success than the individual difference between Harry and APA. But if anything, APA has just shown that. Why wasn't this guy at least trying scrims? Because he seemed to have more synergy with Pioshik like this immediately off the bat. At least APA has a willingness to kind of go all in and commit to plays. And he doesn't need to know Korean in order to do that, right? If you're a professional player, you should have some level of understanding of, kill pressure on a player and an ability to go all in. And you don't need Pioshik to tell you to do that. Good pro players just know when to all in or when to take the fight in the 1v1 or a 2v2. And that's it. And APA just appears to have a lot more confidence and agency and playmaking potential than Harry ever did. So I like the switch a lot. Will it work for the long term, or is this a result? The question is this a result of the team being in the right place in a metagame where some of APA's champions make sense for an effective style that can be played right now? Or is this going to fade potentially as the meta shifts? But, just looking at his champion pool from challengers and from LCS this split, he plays Ari, he plays Twisted Fate, he plays Annie. I mean, this guy is basically he plays Tristana. This guy's basically just BDD, just in American form.
Plus, if he just renames himself to Appa, that even sounds Korean.
That's true. Appa is the Korean word for dad.
There you go. And he showed him who the daddy is.
So I like the switches that they've made. There's a possibility that with these switches, the Team Liquid can actually win LCS. I don't think that's implausible to say right now, especially with EG looking worse. FlyQuest basically out of the picture unless a miracle occurs. And they have FlyQuest has the talent, we know that, but hasn't displayed it whatsoever this split. Golden Guardians looks okay, but it's not outrageous to think that Team Liquid could beat them in a best of series. And C9 has a lot of strengths, and I like the fact that C9 will always try and win a game even when they're behind. They like to press their advantages very aggressively, but sometimes they're playing from really large deficits due to their solo lanes, or even when they're ahead, they overpressure and lose crucial fights, which do allow teams to have windows back into the game. And if you're playing Ziggs comps with insane wave clear, well, there's a chance to always come back. There's always a chance to come back. So Liquid does have a shot, I think, at a title.
You've got Summit. He's still a very good top laner.
Yep.
There's a lane you can win through that not everyone has the best players in. So there's angles for it for sure. By the way, I'll tell you a team we should talk about, because we never talk about nowadays. We just talk about the best teams. Mate, if last split was fraudulent and they somehow got in the play, 100 Thieves is beyond fraudulent now, mate. Here's a garbage.
Here's a fun one for you. What the fuck happened to Closer? What the fuck happened to Closer? I do not understand how this guy could have fallen off so hard.
If you haven't watched it, he doesn't even fulfill the one thing you'd think he always had. You know how even at the end, Dardoch could still gank and get kills off? This guy can't even get the early kills. He can't even get you ahead in a lane. The rest of his game's still bad, but he can't do that. So when they won last time, 100 Thieves won, and he was popping off and all that doesn't happen. That does not happen anymore. It's sad.
Here's a fun stat for you, Thorin. How many first bloods do you think Closer has a kill or assist in?
Right, I'd say 0, but that's because I saw the clip where you said that you had 0. So.
Fuck you.
Should have asked me. That's on my own social media gets recommended to me as well. The joke is I get bombarded by my own. I get bombarded by videos of me on other channels when I open TikTok and Instagram. I can't escape myself, which is sort of what I could call my biography.
So
no, 0 guys. He's actually gone 0 first, even assisted on 0 first kills.
He has a 0% first blood percentage. He's played 15 games. To put this in context of other players, Croco has played 12 games and has a 17% first blood rate. Grizzly has played 16 for Hanwha Life now, and he has a 19% first blood rate. Okay, and by the way Grizzly is playing on Hanwha Life now, Grizzly doesn't even give a shit about getting ganks in the early game. The only thing Grizzly is doing is cross-mapping objectives and cross-mapping camps. Grizzly's entire game plan is farm as much as possible, avoid the other junglers, don't gank lanes, and when he sees the other jungler, either take Herald or Dragon. That's HLE's early game plan right there. They just wait until the late game to fight you these days. And even then, Grizzly has a 19% first blood ratio. And if the team didn't have any wins, maybe this would be excusable. But Closer, how do you go from the king of first blood to 0% over 15 games? How is that possible? His kill percentage his kill participation is the lowest of any jungler in the league at 59%. Okay?
Obviously, he would be the worst ever player that Gabby Durden could cast. Call back. By the way, I'll tell you the other thing about their team that I cannot handle. Bro, aside from Team Liquid, is everyone just bad at signing Koreans now? Like this Quid guy, dude, this is almost on the level of Ruby. This guy's just a bomb. He's just not a good player. The fuck?
I mean, he's gotten better than his debut, but
he's had a bunch of bad games though, mate. Some mad underwhelming ones.
From talking to people on the Korean side, there was some hype for Quid. And look, it's a professional debut. I think he does deserve a little bit more time. He's had some decent games. I don't think he's the biggest problem on this team. Look, Closer is abysmal right now, and they might as well just not have a jungler. 100 Thieves. It's not why you signed up for this team. It's not what he's supposed to do. I don't know what is going on with this guy, but he is playing entirely differently because the whole thing about Closer was that he got you early game advantages. That was his purpose. And you could count on that. He was good at doing this in the early game. And he's even playing Lee Sin now again, and he can't fucking get it done. Like, how are we in a meta where Closer can play Viego and Lee Sin, historically his best champions, where he was very good at getting early game advantages, and completely shit the bed? Like, I get it if he's playing Sejuani. I get it. Not to say that Sejuani can't get early kills. Obviously, if you draft good top laners and mid laners that have synergy, you can get a lot of kills in the early game with Sejuani. But these are the Closer champs, right? So you really just have to do better in this situation. So I don't even necessarily blame Quid. Quid is playing without a jungler.
I just don't think he's that good, man. Not for
he's
an
not
import,
that good.
especially for an import.
Yeah, he's not that good, but he also, Closer is. I think what's wild about Closer too, Thorin, is like if you think that he's not getting first blood, he's not ganking, he's not doing things for the lane, he doesn't have a high kill participation. Well, surely he must be farming a lot, right? He must be farming great. No. Gold difference at 10, negative 208 for Closer. It's outrageous. He's not even farming. He's doing fucking nothing.
He is representing his country because he is a turkey.
He's a turkey. There you go.
And they tell you what, if he sticks around, he'll be getting carved up. The joke is you'll never be at Worlds, so you won't make it Thanksgiving, mate.
You won't make it to Thanksgiving.
So there you go.
So Grizzly, by the way, who I just described Grizzly's play style, right? And what he's doing for Hanwha Life.
Yeah.
Grizzly is third in the league in terms of gold difference at 10 because he's farming instead of ganking. And even Grizzly has a higher first blood percentage. Even Grizzly has a higher kill participation. In fact, his kill participation is 71%, which is 12% higher than Closer's. Closer
isn't even good at PvE. He's not even good at killing camps.
Yeah, he's not.
It's not the fundamental thing of being a jungler.
What the fuck is Closer doing in these games? Literally, what is he doing? Where is he spending his time? It's outrageous.
He gets lessons from Nice or something. $350 a time. It's worth it. It's worth it, guys. So he's potentially challenger on Latin America.
So to close out the Closer conversation, Closer is bad at first blood, bad at ganking now. He's bad at farming. He's bad at playing his signature champions. Why hasn't this guy been subbed out? Speaking of GMing in North America.
The joke is he came in for Midland. Nuke Duck should just play jungle. You probably shot call better than him. You know what I mean?
Actually, probably.
That's not an idea, mate.
Look, all I'm going to say is it can't be worse than Closer. Because we also know that Closer couldn't shot call the late game because historically that was 100 Thieves' problem. So if you're going to get a jungler who does nothing in the early game, it might as well be somebody who can shot call in the late game, right? Might as well be Nuke Duck. I think it's a good idea.
If you're someone who's known as like a god on Lee Sin, and then later on you're not good at ganking, what do you have left, bro? Like all you had was hands. Now you have no hands. It's over. It's just over, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so 100 Thieves. I mean, this was always going to be a meme team. When this season started, we knew that. But
There's
Yeah,
two things I do love though. One, after all the shit Doublelift talked when he was core streaming, he comes back and he's like above average, but he's not the old Doublelift, and he's definitely not going to be able to carry this team. And then secondly, Bjergsen's done him again. Just like Bjergsen retired when Doublelift, I thought we were going to play another year. So then Doublelift played a bit more like, yeah, just fuck it, retire. Then he's like, hey, what if we like team up and do another team? It'll be like the Expendables, but in League of Legends. The joke was they were expendable. Like Bjergsen just left and they say, oh, so now I'm just the getting fucking rocked again. Yep. But here's the thing. He's a mark. Doublelift is a mark for Bjergsen, mate. He's just a mark. Just a mark.
Well, I think Bjergsen is the Bjergsen era is finally over for real this time. I don't think there's going to be another.
I think it was over after season 8. Well, season 9. Season 9 was the one. Season 9.
Sure.
But yeah, whatever. It's all done now, definitely.
I mean, really over at this point in time. LCS continues just to be terrible, though. I made a joke the other day on Twitter because I don't know if you saw this, but they were doing the new mode promotion, the Soul Fighter. Yeah, where they used the LCS studio to bring in influencers and kind of do American Gladiator style games, which was fun, by the way. It was a fun idea. It was something I've been wanting to do in esports for a long time, and I think that they executed it pretty well. But I did happen to tune into the stream when there were 50,000 viewers. And that has been way more than most LCS matches on the mainstream this split. And so the joke is somehow that dudes jumping over a spinner is more exciting than actual LCS games at this point in time.
I'm not even joking. Fire all the LCS pros, shut down the orgs, and just literally do like fucking that shit you do in America where it's like a rodeo and there's just people being kicked off bulls. You guys don't know it. In the South, that would have like 100,000 views if that was just like MonteCristo getting kicked off a bull or something. Oh my God. And everyone would be like, and then obviously you can have Overly come on and be like, yum, yum, gang, ice cream.
Dude, have you seen those NPC streams? This is a total aside. The NPC streams on TikTok are absolutely wild.
That's what I'm talking about.
I know. What a time to be alive, dude.
To be fair, that isn't that much different from what morons like Ludwig and MonteCristo do on stream anyway. Like, essentially, they just have a less structured version of NPC streams.
Hassan's stream is basically an NPC stream.
Yeah, basically.
It's a Marxism soundboard. But I look at that, and to your point about the mechanical bull, if the question is, would I rather watch Skara ride a mechanical bull or watch LCS? The answer is, I would rather watch Skara ride a mechanical bull.
I want to see Skara drink a yard of ale and then ride a mechanical bull, and if he loses, he goes in a gunge tank. That's 100k views on Twitch right there. And then afterwards, I don't know, what's her name? What was the name of that person? Like Cutie or what was the person they brought
Judy Cinderella?
Yeah, she just then interviews Doublelift afterwards. There you go. I've covered all the bases. Covered all the bases. That's 100k views guaranteed.
Yeah. Oh, man.
She just entertaining, I can't lie. It sounds better than some of these games I've seen.
I mean, Cutie Cinderella at least puts together the streamer awards every year. She actually does streams and like puts together event production that completely puts LCS to shame.
Her name is, every time I see it, I obviously think of I'm a Cutie Pie, and the contrast couldn't be more crazy in my mind. That's essentially, here's the joke. Cutie Pie is the catfish of what you would think you'd get if you saw the picture of the other one. Like, that's who you'd actually be like, what the fuck? It's because essentially Cutie Pie is just the comic book guy of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
You know? Any, basically?
Yes.
In a lovable way, of course.
Yeah. Cutie Pie was great. He was actually one of the more entertaining people ever in the LCS. Really fun. So
anyway, if you've not seen it, go back, because it's not about the meta. It's just really funny. Go back and watch my original reflections with I'm a Cutie Pie. It is one of the funniest ones ever. It's so funny, it's ridiculous. And it will have aged mega because it's all just like, it's just like comedy essentially. It's not even about like League of Legends basically.
Yeah, very, very funny guy. But yes, the LCS just continues its epic free fall. And also, as an aside, if Riot can put together these events and think that they're profitable, because why would they debut this new mode with a bunch of influencers if they didn't think that they were going to make money off their new mode or bring back a bunch of players? It just goes to show that the LCS is probably still profitable if they continue to run it. But again, they're hiding all the money, so it's the teams that suffer. They are spending an inordinate amount of money to pay all those influencers to come into their studio, to set up all of these games, to hire all of the talent to do this, to have an extra day of broadcast production. And they think that's going to be a profitable endeavor for them.
So the problem as well is, it just in classic Riot fashion, the name of the mode shows how incredibly uninspired they are, because they thought, like, right, one or two of the great, like, fighting games. Well, you've got Street Fighter, of course. Street Fighter, yeah, I love Street Fighter. And then there's Soul Calibur. Soul Calibur. Well, we can't call it Street Fighter. We can't call it Soul Fight. Like, give me a fucking break. Like, this is just bad. It's just a whack name. It's just generic.
I mean, that's what Riot does. They just steal from every other intellectual property in the universe. That's their whole thing. They've never made an original game. They just steal from other games and other genres.
That's why it's perfect that Jack did the Monty and just ripped you off.
Yeah, exactly.
It's totally on brand for Riot. Yeah.
Riot challenge. Make an original competitive game title. Don't make a tac shooter. Don't make a MOBA. You didn't invent those. Invent a new one. Do that. How about that? All right. You want to talk about LEC summer groups a little bit? Obviously, there were some big surprises in here, particularly the downfall of Fnatic to SK Gaming.
Sure. I mean, the main problem with that one is this. One of the things I do think is different about the format now is you have to remember the Noah guy had only played 9 BO1s ever in LEC, and he's into the groups immediately, BO3s where you can get exposed. Like, he definitely looked at, like, it's not that he played bad. He just looked like, when things in the rest of the game got away from him, he just looked hesitant. Whereas before, he looked like a stud, mate. He was looking really, really good before. Then there's also the whole thing where, like, I mean, it's only one best of 3, but fucking Humanoid's back up to his old tricks. That was so gross. If you guys only knew, maybe you know what? If he pisses me off enough, maybe I'll look into it. If you guys knew actually how big that contract is, it's fucking egregious the way he's played this last year and a half. It's really egregious.
Yes. He did show up at Worlds, though. I will say that.
That ain't enough. You can't show up for 1.5 games. Who gives a shit?
He did very well at Worlds.
You had judged. No, he did do very well. He had a couple of good games in BO1s. That's it.
Yeah. I do agree that he's been underwhelming just based on the expectations and honestly the hot market that existed for this guy. There was a bidding war over him for this latest contract.
That's what's fucked him. I've heard, for real, I said this on Best Damn League Show, but I'll reveal it here. I've heard that teammates and coaches of his, even they can't read him, Monty. He is inscrutable. No one actually knows if he even cares. And the rumor with some of the players who were retired who were in the LEC circle, they tell just me he doesn't give a shit because he's got the bag.
I mean, he's certainly not practicing very much from what I understand.
He's
not very motivated.
People I don't like League of Legends.
His name Humanoid is then kind of applicable. If he is actually inscrutable, like you say, he's not even really a human being at that point in time. He's just like a human being, and you can't really identify with him or play with him.
Strange guy, mate. It's just a strange guy. It's just sad because obviously a few years ago he was really good. That is a couple of years ago now.
He is, when he's at his peak, he's a world-class mid laner. He is legitimately a very, very, very good player.
But here's why it sucks now, Monty. He's the veteran. The Oscarinen guy barely played. This is his second split. The Noah guy, this is his first split. Trimbioni just came off being like not that good and on a dodgy-ass team. Bro, it's your time, Humanoid. Then look at the champions, Monty. Like, even though Dom made a good point that Azir isn't like the lane bully Azir anymore, it's still Azir. It's still one of your champions, Humanoid. That's what you came up on. That's what you showed. You were good in Splice and Mad Lions. Like, these are the champions that you're supposed to be styling. LeBlanc, dude, he doesn't even play it. He doesn't even play. They ban LeBlanc. That just shows you how far we've come, boys. Like, so to me, that's why I have to put a lot of the blame on him. He's the big star. He's the one with the experience. And who are you losing to? You're not losing to G2. Dude, you're getting rocked by SK. A team that you even saw in the next match. They're not actually that good. They just have, like, you know, a little bit of pop-off value. And spoiler, their mid has to pick a Carly. It's not even any choice in that equation. He's even, like, draft locked as to what he has to play. Like, you saw him on the Syndra. It was just whatever. It's all right, you know. It's all right.
I think Humanoid played badly in this series, but there were other issues. Like, Oscarinin just getting dumpstered by Irrelevant wasn't on anybody's bingo card coming into this series.
Here's the thing. Dom mega hypes Oscarinin. I think he's good, above average, but I also think Irrelevant is always slightly underrated. I think SK is not good. He's actually good, mate. Like, one, he was really good when he first came in as just a tank. And dude, his carries now are legit. Like, he actually can fucking do stuff now. I think he's sort of like the sleeper at the LEC for me.
Yeah, I think he's definitely overperforming expectations, and he has since the Misfits debut. But I also think that in this series, there were a couple of I think SK, let me start this way. I think SK had a very good read on the meta. And one of the problems with the LEC format is that you're patch jumping, right? You're jumping from 13-11 straight into 13-13. And what that's going to create is that every time you switch patches, and especially if you switch multiple patches, it's going to take an adjustment period for teams to kind of get used to it. And what happens is sometimes, teams get false data about the meta because of the unpredictability of scrims. So they might think certain things are better than they actually are. Whereas some teams are going to hone in very quickly on what the patch is about, especially if they're doing research on other regions very heavily. And I think one thing in SK's favor was that they figured out a couple of things that worked for them that are very meta picks. Number one, they figured out that Kai'Sa is incredibly broken right now. And there's not really another way to interpret the information that we're getting from a lot of these leagues, and especially the behavior of a lot of top teams. As I've said on previous shows this week, KT has played 10 games of Kai'Sa in a row at this point in time. And they basically just first pick it on blue side every single time that it's available. Actually, that changed, I believe, last night with I haven't seen the games yet, but it should have changed last night with the KT versus DRX games.
Wasn't it that one they played?
Yes, versus Damwon. Sorry. Yes, I misspoke. Well, actually, it's D+. Whatever. You guys get it.
Whatever, yeah. They'll always be Damwon to me. I don't give a fuck when they change the name like that.
Yeah, so Aiming did actually play Ezreal and Aphelios last night, as opposed to the Kai'Sa, because D+ banned Kai'Sa both games, which is smart. But whenever it's available, it has been KT first picking it. And I think SK realized that, so they had the draft priority on the Kai'Sa way up and had a lot of practice using it, so they were looking quite good in this meta. And when they didn't have the Kai'Sa, one thing that was very important in both of their series that we've seen thus far, so their series against Fnatic and their second series against BDS.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Against Excel. Yeah, against Excel, was that they were prioritizing the Poppy for Marcoon. So either they were getting a very broken champion that they were playing well around, or they were prioritizing a lot of early objectives with Marcoon, and Marcoon has been very good about using Poppy ult to secure objectives. So their timing around objectives has been good, and their ability to use Keeper's Verdict to keep people out of engagements has also been very good. But when those things were both denied, like we saw in the final game between XL and SK, they really struggled. But I do think in terms of, and they also, to SK's credit, were running a fast push strategy with Tristana and Ziggs in their first game against XL. I just think SK had a very good read on the meta. I think what SK is doing is exactly what all professional teams should be doing at this point in time. And it was working. Now, I also think that Fnatic had arguably a very bad read on the meta. You don't see teams playing Zeri on 13-13. This champion, has now been nerfed to a significant degree. Noah's not going to be able to carry as hard on it as he could before. And it was kind of a weird throwaway pick, I think, in that instance. So,
what about, obviously, the other end of the equation for Fnatic is G2. G2 just still looks really good. Like, the joke is, Koi had early leads and they had kills, and in theory that should be a game, but like, mate, G2 never loses fights. They just never lose a fight. Like, it doesn't even matter how bad the start of the fight goes. They're probably the best at like turn, re-engage, know when to like fucking focus someone. They just don't lose right now, mate. They probably won't lose, let's be real.
I think G2 looks really good. And I think they play their own style of League of Legends while still fitting nicely into the meta. Yike is developing, I think, really well as a jungler. And they can always go back to Yike carry jungle strategies, even though we've seen less of that. We've seen less of that so far because he's been playing more tanks, playing the Rel, playing the Maokai, playing the Sejuani. But there's also been really unique strategies that only G2 wants to use. And I think it's always been G2 strengths, regardless of the iteration of the roster. Whenever Caps has been here, that has been true. But now we're starting to see targeted strategies, and credit to the G2 coaching staff. I think Dylan Falco does an amazing job. In their second game versus Koi, Malrung has obviously been one of the weak points of Koi so far this year. And when they see him on the Maokai, they lock in a Trundle, and they lock in Lethal Tempo Trundle. And Lethal Tempo is a rune on Trundle that you use directly for dueling, right? If you are going to be playing more of a team fight Trundle, you frequently use Press the Attack. And this version of Trundle his purpose is basically to walk around the map and solo the Maokai. You ult the Maokai to make him weak, and then you just auto attack him into oblivion. And Malrung had a very tough game. So I like some of the adaptations that they've made in terms of draft. And the other thing that this do is if Yike is shadowing the Maokai with this Trundle and constantly threatening the 1v1 kill pressure, well, Hans Sama on this Kalista, which has long been one of his signature champions, it just opens up for a lot of aggression because you just can't win that jungle 1v1.
It's also why I think G2 is so good right now, mate. Not only is almost every player even Caps actually just peaked in this playoff series, in group stage series rather. Like before that, I actually did think Larson was better than him. Almost everyone's peaking. And then think about how the year's gone for Hans Sama, mate. So you have the Draven meta where he just plays that, and if anyone else tries it's never as good. Now he's got Kalista back. Mickey X, by the way, is good on everything. Look at Mickey X's Braum, mate. Like this team, it really is like, here's the difference. I said to everyone, I did a video about, I thought last year's G2 was a bit overrated. Like they won the LEC spring and then the 24-game winning streak. Like that wasn't overrated team. This team actually looks good. This is one where if it goes to Worlds, like I think it could do something. They can mix it up. They can win some BO1s against some LCK, LPL teams. Like I don't know if it's going to ever be one of the all-time great teams, but it looks good. This looks like a team. I'd be happy to send this team to Worlds.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the coaching is really good as well. They are making the most out of these players, and they're making very specific choices against certain teams. Against BDS, they're playing set in the top lane. Like they really are maximizing the available champion pools of these players and playing directly into their strengths.
And as Reckless actually said on LEC, they don't really have to show anything. Like they just sort of like pick a few things that work, stick with them. And if anything, they're not showing their whole hand, Monty. I imagine they have way more than this. If you think about how many games they just played the same shit, like I think that like they just play that like Braum and bot lane all day long. Like they probably have picks that we haven't even seen, man. I want to see the playoffs. I think they're going to torch this split. They're just going to torch
I think I would be shocked if they've lost LEC. Like shocked. They're even toying with the meta in interesting ways. So when they get the Kai'Sa, like they did against BDS in game number 1, and the Jace isn't available to create, more or less of a poke comp, because Nuke has the Jace, they just go ahead and play mid Lucian, right? Which with the culling can provide that. It's not exactly the same. It's not 1-for-1, but it can function in a similar way, as well as doing just fine into the Jace lane. And this is just a result of Caps being a player that has an extraordinarily broad pool. So I think it's a really good answer to what's being shown. And, you get Kai'Sa at this point in time, and you're going to just do really well. Kai'Sa at the moment has a 56% win rate across all major leagues. And I think that win rate's probably going up the more that teams are figuring out with the updates to AD carry itemization, what you can do with this champion. Because it's really, I talked about this on Power Spike, but it's really crazy how versatile this champ is. Because first off, she actually does have multiple functional builds. So if you want to go hard into AD, you can do that, which means that there's not a lot of punishment for early picking her because it doesn't lock you in necessarily to an AD mid laner. Because if you go the most popular build with her, which is the Nashor's Tooth, like Ginsu's Rage Blade Static Shiv build. And then, obviously you can go into Rabadon's after that. Yes, it provides a lot of mixed damage and it provides a lot of AP damage. but you're not locked into that. Like, you can do a Kraken Slayer build if they have a big front line and you're going to be just fine. So it allows a lot of flexibility in the draft. The champion can go mid. The champion can go.
You played it in game 1 against BDS.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other people have played it too. It's not a bad mid champion. So you not only have flexibility in the role that it plays, you have flexibility in the build, and that can influence how you draft the rest of your composition. And, obviously, like, when we talk about Kai'Sa's current abilities, the players have figured out that if you get this Kai'Sa to late game, it's still the same problem that we saw in spring of 2021 with Kai'Sa, which is that the Void Seeker, is so insanely powerful at chunking people out if you have sufficient AP, and it's not that hard for professional players to hit it. And if you hit it, it has a 3-second cooldown once you get to later levels and 4 items, right? 3-4 seconds.
You basically got a poke ADC at that
right,
point.
you're a poke ADC, but the poke is like more than a screen away.
Yes.
And on top of that, the poke allows you to conditionally engage. And
Yes.
I've spoken about this before. Conditional engage is a massive part of the way that professional players play League of Legends. And what I mean by conditional engage is a Sejuani ult. It's you can throw it out there, and if it misses a Leona ult, you're not committed to that engage. And the thing about Kai'Sa is that once you get stopwatch, you can have a pivotal fight in the mid and late game where you basically can use your ult to choose the timing. So the rest of your team can be fighting. You can go in first, or your team can go in first. But what it allows you to do is to basically get into the back line and assassinate an Aphelios, and then you just stopwatch, and nobody can do anything while the rest of your team is following up, right? And protecting you, and like making sure that you're okay during the time that you're in stasis. So it is so powerful to play Kai'Sa right now. And not only that, but Static Shiv removes some of her downside. So Static Shiv allows her to have better wave clear in side lanes. And you want her to have wave clear in side lanes because she is an excellent duelist. Excellent. Like, can 1v1 top laners, right? And the problem with Static Shiv as an item is that there were champions like LeBlanc, like Kai'Sa, that are not supposed to have good wave clear but are good duelists. You don't want good duelists to have good wave clear because then they overtake the entire game of League of Legends. If they can provide map pressure while simultaneously you being able to 1v1 them with anybody on your team, it is really, really tough. So I think Kai'Sa is a massive problem right now because there's almost nothing that she does badly. She can poke, she can provide side lane pressure. She's very, very difficult to kill, especially with the combination of invisibility and stopwatch is like brutal on her. And does
the kit is mega overtuned because of this item. Because, like you say, the W then leads to the ult, which then leads to a Zhonya's. It's like, man, how much are you going to do on your own in this fight? Yeah. And if not, you're just split pushing when no one can 1v1 you, and you're just killing the wave. Like, give me a break.
Yeah, and you do, and as we've seen, if you get to the point where you get 4 items and you get death cap, those W's are taking half the HP off of enemy carries, and they're coming every 3 seconds. So it's stupid. It's a stupid champion right now.
Surely going to get nerfed before Worlds, right?
I would hope so. It's honestly amazing that people have taken a while to figure out how good this is. Not to say that I predicted this, because I didn't run the math on this build, but this build is pretty outrageous.
I mean, the build itself even does remind you of those old fucking champs that just had AD and AP in bot lane from years back, though, like 7-8 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Into the Ginsus, yeah.
So she's really good. And that's why top teams are reliably picking her. I think that's one of the reasons behind SK's success, surprising success in these playoffs, is that they just probably looked at KT and were like, oh shit, look at what you can do with Kai'Sa. We can do that, especially since Exakick is arguably the best player on our entire roster. And let's go ahead and pull this off. And it's not like these strategies are particularly hard to pull off either. Like, as long as you have an AD carry who knows when to engage and when to go into the back line, it's almost unstoppable because one combo of hers against an AD carry, once she gets 3 items in the backline, is just going to kill that AD carry, almost certainly. It's rough. So,
Which
I mean, there are other
ridiculous that is. If an ADC is almost one-shotting someone, their job is to do DPS, consistent damage, for fuck's sake. Not to one-shot. They're not a mid lane. They're not supposed to be one-shotting someone.
You know, if you can thread a W into the backline, and then you get into the backline and you get a couple autos and a Q off and your plasma procs, like it's just over. Just fucking over.
It's when Static Shiv was busted, it actually did make the meta look stupid because you would just see LeBlanc's just autoing people to death. It's like, all it's doing is the auto attack.
Yeah, I mean, it's still good, even though it doesn't have an AP ratio. It's not like we've seen, well, we have seen fewer LeBlancs, to be fair, but the LeBlancs are still building Static Shiv because she can charge it so quickly by blinking around with W. And even if it doesn't, it's not quite as good. It still procs Night Harvester across the entire enemy team. It still does a pretty good job of wave clearing. Yeah, it's still strong. I do think, you know, G2 at the very least has shown some interesting stylistic adaptations. You know, they've proven that you can kind of play the Callista into the Kai'Sa and just bully her in the early game and try and prevent her from becoming this overwhelming AD carry threat. Helps a lot if you have a Callista to have really good objective control, take early objectives, and kind of force the game to end earlier or force fights around those objectives. But it's going to continue to be first pick worthy. And I think we're moving into total ban of Kai'Sa overall.
Makes sense.
But yeah, I think G2 is, as you put it, a super big favorite right now. Caps is popping off again. Broken Blade is not having the really, really tough time that he was having in spring ever since MSI. He's, you know, he had a good performance at MSI. He's been doing much better these days. Hansama back to being his old aggressive lane dominant self.
There's basically no weakness. They have no weakness.
And Mickey X,
team.
like, remember in spring, Mickey X would be running around on Heimerdinger, affecting other lanes. Now Mickey X can play engage champs.
Yeah, he plays champs. He plays everything.
But like, if you want Mickey to be active on the map and do the best that Mickey can do, because he's one of the best roaming supports and playmaking supports, it's awesome to be able to have him on champions like Nautilus now. It's awesome. So, I mean, I still think, you know, if you ask me, Mickey X is the LEC MVP of the year. He's been the most consistent good player.
He's the best player. I would say he's the best player in the LEC this year. I'm with you on that. By the way, as an aside, this is obviously something we mentioned in Competitive Edge, but in the losers match, which Fnatic, by the way, must win if they want to make the championship final thing, although XL, if they do any better, can also display his vitality, right? Fnatic plays Mad, and we point this out on Competitive Edge. The odds are mega for Mad. Like, people have betted, they've bet Fnatic down like 1.3 or something because they were so good, and obviously Mad's on a 7-game losing streak. I don't care what the losing streak is. Mad very much has a capability to win this game, and there's something Mad like a 2.8 or something ridiculous, right?
I'm looking it up right now. It was very high yesterday.
It was a big underdog though. So if you want,
it was 2.8 for Mad Lions, 1.4 for Fnatic.
There you go. Like, first of all, I think that price isn't that good for Fnatic, but if you want to do the underdog one, there's a good one.
Yeah.
And that'd be a great one for the first time bet one, because if you lose, you just get the stake back. If you win, you get 2.8 times. So you're laughing on that one.
I mean, Mad Lions had issues within their series, but again, I think they had a weaker meta read overall.
Oh, they had a terrible one, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, letting Odo Omne have Rumble twice is big question mark, obviously, given the guy's history on this champion. But like the Nocturne game was just completely ridiculous.
Had an absolute screamer. And Amazing said it best on Twitter. He said the game would have been identical if El Yoya didn't play in it.
Yeah.
The joke is all he used R for is just make the map dark. He never went on anyone, did he? He's like, what?
Well, making the map dark. So if we think about it, a difference between Mad Lions in the regular season and playoffs is, like, I think Niski had a couple good games here where Niski was pretty trash towards the end of the round robin stage. So Niski improved in terms of his performance. But the whole point of having that Nocturne in that composition, I can only assume that the idea is you run the Static Shiv LeBlanc like you would a Kennen in a Nocturne Kennen composition, where you're supposed to set up the flank, or you're making it dark and having Karzi on Kai'Sa like go into the back lines and K'Sante isolates somebody, right? And if you have K'Sante isolate someone in a 1v1 where the other players can't see where that player are, K'Sante wins the 1v1, or Kai'Sa picks off somebody for free, basically. It was just so badly executed. Like, they didn't execute the Nocturne ults properly. I think the concept is okay. It was just badly done. It was very badly done. Also, not really the most meta. Not really the most meta. I think Mad Lions.
The rest of LEC is so bad, though. There's a world where Mad Lions does another run and just goes to playoffs and goes through the, it's possible. They still have the players for it, mate.
Yeah. Yeah. I think G2 is just such an overwhelming favorite at this point in time that every other team just really, really fucking struggling. Like, I wish I could have some level of confidence that Koi is going to beat Heretics, but I think Heretics might actually win that one.
Here's a statement that will tell you how bad the LEC is right now. So XL won both their games. No one had them doing this, and won their group. And they're now going to be guaranteed top 3. And they played G2 in the best of 5 upper bracket final. In an upper bracket final, Monty, they are almost 4 odds. Because nobody believes they can win that BO5. I don't think they can. The joke there is, even though that's crazy, I should be saying, take this guy. I'm not even going to take that. I think the actual odds of them winning a BO5, it's too low. The problem with their team, I explain it like this, Monty. They're a symptom of the problems LEC has. Because they're not a good team. They're nowhere near world class. They just have a good flaw. They just have a bunch of players that play like on the same page. They get some good performances out of like top, mid's all right, ADC's all right. I put it this way, which player on their team is even actually like elite at his position? Is anyone? Maybe Odoamne?
I mean, I enjoy Peach's name because it's appropriate when the Peach emoji is supposed to mean ass.
Yeah, that's the only way it's appropriate. And he gets slapped around.
Outside of that one Lee Sin game, which was kind of legit, Peach has been really quite bad.
Yeah, cheeks.
And he's been cheeks.
Yeah. Rosy cheeks, all spanked and shit.
You're really into that this episode, Thorin.
It's all right.
You're really into it. There have been some upsides for Excel. Odoamne is performing a lot better than he did earlier this year. Limit is doing a lot better on the engage supports than he did on enchanters. Abadage is a stable mid laner who's been kind of getting back up to his kind of old form after taking a bit of a break. But the problem is that the ceiling of this team is super low. It's like, where's the superstar player who's going to carry this roster? What, to your point about the floor, they do have good setups around objectives. Like, they understand team compositions. They're providing appropriate vision control. They're doing well on flanks. They're doing well on executing with the tools that they have. But they're always going to be capped by their individual player ability. And that's where I just don't think they can make a reasonable deep run.
Here's the problem. If your best player is Odoamne and his whole shit is play weak side, you're in for a tough time winning. You can be good. You can shore up the weaknesses, but yeah, to win. By the way, this is an example of a team where, look, they have a chance to do it. Like I said, if they win one series, they can get ahead of Vitality and go to the championship finals and then maybe go from there. If they go to Worlds, it's going to be rough. Because what pop-off factor they have in a BO1 against LCK or LPL? I don't know how it can happen. So I think this is an example of a team that'll get torn up if they go to Worlds, mate. You've got to hope like people like Fnatic and Mad Lions going are actually good, basically, in my opinion.
Yep. All right, we probably should talk about LCK a little bit. Because those matches are coming up again. I have yet to see.
Faker is coming back. That was the news that I saw came out after our competitive edge. He did an interview, didn't he? Saying didn't he say he's coming back or something? I saw there's an interview on Reddit.
I saw there was an interview. I didn't see said he was coming. I mean, he's coming back eventually.
It just says while. Put it this way: the sentence goes, "While I was injured." Well, I mean, that does imply you're not injured anymore. So I'd assume he's coming back.
Sure. We'll see. I don't think they're going to reveal. Like, even if he is coming back, they're not going to say that in advance because they don't want to give teams a heads up. So I think they'll probably make an announcement if he is coming back, like right before their game. And so they won't do it until 24 hours before their game because there's going to be a roster submission deadline after the LCK games. And they don't want to give a competitive advantage to their opponents. So they will not. until they submit their rosters for their games on Friday, they won't announce that whether he's coming back or not. So I assume we'll hear about that probably within the next 24 hours or so. But they won't let him know because they're playing HLE, and that is kind of an important match. I think he's probably going to come back at this point in time. But we'll just have to
really do the fucking WWE like, it's that Faker's music. Oh my god! And he just appears and fucking starts playing or whatever. The joke about that team, by the way, is they'd have been better off having fucking Paul Belter play than Porby. Paul Belter was at least a competent mid laner. You look at
it's true.
Give me a break. Put some fucking respect on Paul Belter's name.
When is he coming back? He actually would be an upgrade on many of the mid laners in LCS at this point in time.
And he can speak Korean.
That
reminds me of a classic story we didn't tell when we were on some of the Insights. So let me regale you young nephews who don't know this story. When I was in Korea, when I moved there to live there for a few years, Monty, at the end of 2014, it was where for that boot camp, EG was making that like mostly Korean team, where before that they'd had like, I think maybe the one where they had Snoopy and fucking Yellow Pete and all those guys. And this was still not released yet, Monty. It wasn't announced that they were making this team. I was just going through the underground one day at like fucking something ridiculous like Sinchon or something in the underground. And as I went through the turnstile, I saw a bag that said LCS Paul Belter. And I was like, hey, Paul Belter. And he turned around and I go, what are you doing here? Are you here for some sort of boot camp? And he goes, no. And then as he says that, it's not even a joke, the Korean players come running down and they go like, oh, and I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, I've got to go now. And he quickly leaves like really awkwardly, like some fucking Kirby Enthusiasm scene. And the joke is, even though I didn't like it, like I actually had seen that they were doing this like Korean roster and that was like what they were building or whatever. Like it was actually pure. That one that if you remember, I think the Winter Fox one with like Paragon and all that shit that happened later. I was actually the first person to actually see that. And just that's how unlucky Paul Belter is. I just happened to be walking through the same like actual underground station at the time. Because if people don't know, the underground is the shit in Korea. It's even got Wi-Fi. You can just be on it, just do it on your phone. Do not everyone's on their phone.
It's super clean.
Yeah,
super clean, super efficient.
Really cheap, mega.
Yep, it's awesome. Yeah, we'll see if he comes back or not. I think we probably should preview the Gen.G versus KT match a bit. The question
would be the best game of the season.
Yeah, like I said, the games we started recording this at 8 a.m. my time. The games happened in the middle of the night, so I haven't watched D+ versus KT yet. I'll be doing that later today. But the question was like, how clean are these matches going to be for KT, considering they struggled a little bit and kind of almost lost the series to DRX last week. But that was also after they won 18 consecutive games within the LCK. And we knew they were going to come up on a tough week, first off playing D+ and then having to play Gen.G immediately afterwards. And they 2-0 D+. So continuing on this roll, I think KT is the best team in this league right now. They have a really, really, really excellent read on this meta.
Won the most games. They won 25 games.
Yeah. Gen.G I think hasn't played. They haven't played the same number of series.
Right, there's one series,
right?
you're right. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
there's one series difference.
Might get that.
Yeah. It's
still
Gen.G,
very good though, because if you think of KT's style, for them to be 25-5 is really impressive to me.
Yeah, I think they're not taking a lot of risks, and that's one thing you could criticize about KT is potentially their versatility, but they're just doing power picks. You know what I mean?
It works.
They're playing the meta super well. They have a very clear draft priority, and if you try, my question really was a couple weeks ago: how deep does certain players' champion pools go, where they can still play the same style of League of Legends that they're playing right now, which is that BDD is more or less on utility/engage mids, that Cuz is playing like Sejuani or Viego. So either he's trying to, these are champions that synergize really well with a lot of Keen's champion pool and can get Keen early advantages, as well as, obviously snowball team fights if you're on the Viego. And so we got to see in the Breon series, because they played Breon back to back. In the first series, Breon really aggressively targeted BDD's champion pool, and then we got to see things like the Veigar come out. And turns out KT knows how to play around the Veigar extremely well, especially around choke points with the cage. They synergize really well with understanding when the cage is coming down and how they can kind of maximize the value of the cage in a team fight, which is critical to any Veigar team. And in the second series, we got to see them pinch Cuz's champion pool. And that's when the Nocturne came out, right? And they played around the Nocturne really well. So honestly, like, we've seen quite a bit from KT at this point in time where it's really, really hard to aggressively attack champion pools on KT without starting to leave up some really, really powerful picks. I mean, Cuz even played the Skarner that week as well, which is something Brion had been playing previous to, like Umti had been playing previous to that.
Well, to me, the best player on KT is Keen. And like, look,
Yes.
I'll give the room because they haven't played that maybe Bin can also be the best. I think Keen is the best top player in the world, mate. And by the way, his champion pool is really deep. He even does like some of those like weird fucking pocket picks and Quinn and shit.
I think Bin 369 and Keen are the best top laners in the world at the moment. Yeah, the Quinn is very interesting because especially in their match against DRX last week, he fell behind on the Quinn. And it is very, very difficult to play the Quinn when you're behind, because if the other team can dictate the pace of the game and force you to team fight, Quinn is just ass at team fighting. And yet, Keen still manages to have very good flank timings in team fights and find people who are isolated and get the most out of the champion. So,
like, I love that matchup in a Doran, mate. I love that all day long. This guy's a carry top laner. Doran's just Doran.
To be fair to Doran's been playing really well recently.
Yeah, the expectations are set that low, mate, that you just say that. Now, why didn't you put him in that convo there with the fucking best players in the world then if he's playing? He's on a team that's never lost, Monty. He's playing better. So go ahead. Tell me how good he is. Exactly.
So I will say this about Doran. He spent a lot of this season losing lane, but being good in team fights. And unfortunately, if you lose lane and top super hard, as Doran has been wont to do against very good teams at an international level, they will snowball the game off of that, and it becomes really hard, even if you are a good team fighter, to come back. Now, that said, the last few weeks, Doran has been performing extremely well. He's been playing a lot of Gangplank. He's been carrying games. But here's the caveat. The only good team they played in the last 2 weeks was T1, and that was T1 that was completely mind shattered by Bengi and Faker leaving, and Zeus had a very rough week, and last week Zeus bounced back in terms of his individual form. Zeus actually looked better than he did the week previously. So I don't...
You don't know how many times you've said Zeus, and I've just thought, like, well, there's an obvious wealth of jokes here. Oh, wait. 2014. Yes, 2014. Right. Whatever. Put it back on the shelf, Thorin. We learned our lesson the first time. Old school law for people who know.
There you go. But otherwise, like, look at the teams they've been playing. Nongshim, DRX, and Live Sandbox. Okay? So Doran popping off in lane is... against those teams is very different than popping off in lane versus Keen. And there also have been a lot of very good performers. Peanut, I think, is in the conversation for MVP of LCK. Obviously, as I've said on multiple shows now.
Understandable.
Yeah. I think Keen...
That's ridiculous.
I think Keen deserves MVP. That's Monty's real opinion.
Sure.
But there are people who would make a case for Peanut. There are people who would make a case for Pays this season on LCK.
By the way, it's now Peanut himself who's the razor cake, mate. Because every fucking time I start to believe, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I shot up there. Maybe it's time for Peanut to go clutch. And it's like, fuck, you know.
You'll love this too. Peanut has one of the higher damage percentages of junglers because he's been playing like a lot of Kazakhs and carry champs and shit like this.
I mean, by the way, he can still play those. He does have the mechanics still.
Yeah, he's not as good as he was, obviously, but yeah,
it's because he was one of the absolute best then, mate. He's still good though. He
yeah,
hasn't gone. He hasn't lost his hands.
He is, and he's winning these games. And absolutely, can Gen.G beat KT? Yes, it's not a foregone conclusion like we thought the telecom war was when people were still thinking like, is KT legit? Now KT's super legit, but Gen.G in the last couple of weeks is absolutely taking care of business. They've looked really strong. A lot of their weaknesses against the worst teams haven't shown up, but it's going to be very, very different this week when they have to play KT. And looking forward towards the end of the split, I mean, they still have to play HLE and D+ as well, and those are going to be much bigger tests for them. I think the problem with Gen.G, generally speaking, is that the top lane pool overall in LCK is very weak. Keen is clearly number one. Zeus has been inconsistent this split. Doran has been improving, but the rest of the league doesn't really have very potent top laners. And even the players that exist that are pretty good. So Dudu is an example. He's on Kwangdong, and like the rest of his team kind of sucks, but he's actually been individually quite a standout, I would say.
This is a point I actually made to a guy that was one of my donators when I do that donator discussion on my Patreon. I said, this is so crazy for Korea because the whole thing about Korea is the region of the carry top laner. And now, like, dude, Keen is like the last of the Mohicans. Bear in mind, Zeus just chokes internationally for some reason. Like, this is the last one, the last like true superstar carry top laner that you can rely on. Because think about the other teams that have been good the last few years. You have people like Doran and Kana are the players who are on the top of these sides of the map. Like, they're above average players. They're not bad players, but this is the region that, like, the joke is if we're doing best carry top laners ever and we do a list of the top 20, bro, like, it's going to be Koreans for like the first 9 or something, or 10 or something. It's just Korean. It's the Shy. It just never stops. Yeah, people, McNoon, Shy himself, he never stops. Fucking Smeb, just the list is infinite. Even Summit's pretty good. Not even that list, but he's pretty good.
Right, Noguri, right?
Noguri, of course.
Yeah, the Shy might be a player who's had his entire career in LPL, but he is in fact Korean by blood. So yeah, I think it is very difficult outside of I think 369 and Bin are really maybe Cool back in the day. Maybe you can make an argument for Cool, the former OMG player in LPL as
mid laner.
Oh, who's the top laner on that roster?
Oh, you mean Going?
Going, yeah, that's it.
Yes, there you go.
Sorry, my bad.
And PDD was pretty good back in the day as well. There's another one. There's a couple.
Yeah. So there are a few. There have been a few Chinese top laners,
but it is the Korean position because the joke. If people don't know, back in the day was EU produces mid laners, LPL produces the fucking AD carries, Korea produces the top laners, and then the joke is LCS produces money. Boom, boom. And now the joke is even they don't produce money anymore. So everyone's Sherlock. China has everything. It's game over for the rest of the world.
LCS
talk about League of Legends, not the geopolitical situation. Whatever.
LCS has lost everything, man. They're not even good at drama anymore. LPL is clapping LCS in terms of drama.
Just as an aside, Voldemort, aka He Who Shall Not Be Named, because maybe, I don't know, maybe it'd be funny if this video could get on Reddit and then everyone could just talk about all the sins we committed in real life, but I definitely haven't. Voldemort, he's just put out a banger article on his Substack that is so fucking good that references China and Saudi Arabia. You just got to go read it. It's like, it actually is Swiftian how good it is. Because I know dumbasses, at first you'll take it like, this real, like, give me a break. Read the whole thing. Like, because I even thought it was over, Monty. When he finished the Saudi part, I was like, this is already great. Then I scrolled and it starts that China bit. I'm like, fuck, because it's so edgy, boys. It's so... And by the way, it's the sort of shit where y'all can't even retweet this if you work in the industry. It's over for you if you even hit that retweet button. Like, this actually is game over. You better just enjoy it from a distance. Yeah. Look, but don't touch, basically. It's like a strip club. That was the rule,
Hashtag
I will say, shout out Magic City. They ran things a little bit differently there. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Hashtag Richard Lewis strip club. There's a mental image for you. But yeah, that article is very funny, especially the China bit you're talking about, his Uyghur Reformation League that he's going to. The
best part is when he goes that it will feature players from around the region, such as players from Tibet, strike through China. It will feature them from Taiwan, strike through China. It will feature them from Hong Kong, strike through China. The satire is so fucking funny. It's so well done, mate. The joke is, when I read that, I actually do think he almost should just give up doing investigative journalism. Just do fucking if you did satirical art, because you know how bad like Esports Express was. Like, they were just like fucking, it was just like freshmen coming up with like whack angles. I would read like satirical articles like this every week, mate, if you did them right. And it was a clever way of sort of making you actually realize the real issues with those countries, but by making it sound like it wasn't a big deal. It's so well done. It was actually masterfully executed, I thought.
I mean, it also just is so insightful into the current state of esports. And I think, that's what has made us so frustrated on the Four Horsemen, has been that, it's just been a grift this whole time. And basically, ever since esports started exploding, the first grift was, this is going to be the next NBA. This is going to have 100 million fans in the United States in 5 years. So the VC poured in and they grifted the VC and said, yes, if you invest $10 million now, your investment's going to be worth $400 million in a few years. Well, that didn't work out. Then they started grifting the sponsors, right? Then the sponsors come in and they say, okay, well, we're going to be the next big thing. Get in now, major American sponsors. Except, yeah, we're not going to do a good job of actually servicing you or engaging with fans. We'll just slap your name on our analyst desk, and that's going to be good enough, right? That's worth $5-10 million a year. Well, turns out there wasn't good conversion from that. So the next grift was the crypto grift, where they were going to use this up-and-coming industry. Everybody was getting crypto sponsorships. Hello, TSM and FTX. Oh, yeah, well, this $100 million deal for 10 years. That's going to be the next bridge, right? Because it's never been about sustainability. It's been about getting the bag so that we can continue to lose money, but someone else is paying for it. And it started with VC, then it moved to traditional sponsors, then it moved to crypto, but the bottom fell off of crypto extremely quickly. And you know what the next move is now? Well, somebody wants to pay for that. Somebody wants to pay for that. And those people are the Chinese and Saudi Arabian governments. They're the ones.
I've got an idea for a parody movie. This could be on Nerd Legion one day if they made it. It's called Indiana Jones and the Conflict of Interest. And what Indiana Jones has to do is find out he has to battle against Riot, Blizzard, and ESL. And his mission is to find out where their infinite source of blood money is coming from. And in doing so, it's sort of like The Big Short. He unveils actually the economic corruption of the world.
And the MacGuffin, the artifact, is the bloodstone. It's a stone that you squeeze blood from, right?
Yes. But in doing so, the problem is it has an aura effect. As you squeeze it, all of your integrity just evaporates off you, and you can never return. You can never undo that at that point in time.
So yeah, that's the world we live in. Nobody ever wants to make this thing sustainable. It's just looking for who is going to pay a ludicrous amount of money to lose on esports next.
And in order to make each fresh bloodstone, because they keep regenerating them, they have to take 1,000 locals of whatever particular group or cause you supported. And in order to pay your day rate, they have to put them into a liquefier, and then it makes the next stone. So you know that this is what happens. But at the same time, they die anyway. So shouldn't you just be able to work the event? You don't have kids after all.
It's actually shocking.
Someone clip that.
The level of justification that some people.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
And look, here's the thing.
My favorite one was a certain person I won't reference who recently, they only did this last year. And then when someone was like, but last year you said everyone was a sellout if they went to Saudi Arabia. They're like, yeah, but that was last year. That doesn't reflect my views now. It's like, bro, what the hell? What? Bro, yeah, last year you said that it's 10 years ago. What? People are so wild. They are just shameless, aren't they? They're just shameless, man.
Well, I just don't understand why people say these things. Because as I have said multiple times, guys, I have been a consultant for ESL. I have taken the Saudi money, okay? But the difference is I don't just go on social media and say I will or will not do these certain things. I'm very transparent about what I'm doing on all of the content that I make. And so when we talk about this, I just don't understand why other people can't just be like, yeah, I wanted the bag. Or why would I, what do you gain by grandstanding against this? You are a fucking esports caster. You can't change the geopolitical situation in the world. So if you're going to take a stand, just do it because those are your beliefs. If you're, that's the only reason you should be doing it. You can't make a difference. You can't fucking make a difference.
The joke is, Doublelift calls him up after the grandstand and he goes, what are you doing? We're just people playing in these, we don't get the money if you don't actually work the event. And also, what can we even do? We wouldn't even want esports to shut down. So just work for them anyway. And basically, I've got to just go ruin the LCS, walk out now. It's basically like that. It's the same shit. So you don't actually stand for anything, do you? It's nothing. Just absolutely nonsense.
So I just don't understand the point of doing it. And it's either just stand by what you're going to do and have those beliefs. And that's cool. Do that. But don't just reverse your decision randomly.
By the way, I do though, that they do it so comically, like the person I just referenced to. By the way, it's from Valorant and Rainbow Six, if you know who I'm talking about. Right. But what I love is when people don't just sell out. They sell out for like almost nothing. They just wanted to do the event. And then even worse than that, they have to look like a fool forever. Like my favorite one ever is Frostgoran. And the reason why is this, because she said about how she hated not only like how white the LEC was, and then went and did a show with 2 white men. Secondly, she also said about how Riot had like racist and sexist hiring policies and created an environment that was essentially like unwelcoming to people from those groups.
Yeah.
Then she
Very
didn't
serious accusation.
She didn't come and work in League of Legends. She worked for another Tencent game, Pokemon Unite. And as I've already said on my show with Rich, that is amazing because I never knew I needed that gift in my life. Because if you were going to sell out, she sold out. If you don't know, Pokemon Unite's basically League of Legends, but with Pokemon instead, right? So it's even better. She sold out not to do League again and be at the top level of the world. She sold out for real, guys, to be streaming, doing games, going, oh, bloody Pikachu's not ganking and fucking Charizard's all up my ass. Like, I was almost crying. Like that was like I would pre-drink to that or smoke the freeze pipe. Like it was too fucking good, mate. Speaking of which, by the way, she is someone who definitely could have used the freeze pipe, right? She's someone who was. Listen, she was hot in many ways, but she was definitely hot and spicy with the way she was fucking doing those opinions. She was definitely irritating as fuck. Even though, look, I want all that smoke. Not when it's irritating smoke like that, though. And I thought if she'd have just had access to the freeze pipe, and I could have just said to her, look, Frostgoran, you actually do have a good game. I want to get what you're trying to give me, like I want the THC from cannabis, but without this hot, irritating smoke. So instead, how about you just chill for an hour, like the food-safe glycerin chamber of a freeze pipe? And you know what? Just take it down 10%, like the deal, using the code LFN at thefreezepipe.com. Also, if you want to give them both barrels, like Frostgoran always did on Twitter, try the twin turbines one that has something to do with water. There you go. By the way, they even sent me that one, I think, because I just did that shout out. So I might look for another one and do a shout out in case I get to send that one too. I've got all the freeze pipes, mate. I've got all the pipes.
They've been great about sending us the stuff. It's been awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a
Seamless.
Great analogy, seamless analogy. And
by the way, guys, I just realized that was my spot, so I had to get it in there.
I really think you're right, Thorin. If Frostgoran, whenever she had an impulse, would just take an hour, like it takes for freeze pipe to chill out, she probably wouldn't have done a lot of the things that she did.
It's actually something I had to learn from Richard. He basically said, like, essentially, it's like a famous piece of wisdom, which is that don't tweet if you're angry or don't make decisions if you're angry, essentially. He said, essentially, if you just like wait and then see, look, if you still really want to do that, like comment or do the thing, you do it anyway. Yeah. But what usually happens is after a amount of time, you either think like, I'll rephrase it or actually maybe just let that one go. You know, and you know what? She never let anything go.
You know what would be amazing?
All the stuff from G4.
You know what would be an amazing feature for Twitter? Is if you could lock your own account to delay your tweets by an hour so that they wouldn't go out immediately. Like you could have a feature, like a setting. So you would actually protect yourself against your own worst impulses a lot of the time. We've all been there. I've been there. Just have the hour delay. And it's like, after you think about it a little bit more, you cool off. Maybe you rephrase that tweet. Maybe you don't make that tweet at all. Maybe you don't. Now, you might not be the most topical, but trying to be topical is one of the biggest traps on Twitter, it turns out.
Being topical is only good for creams.
Oh,
boy. With creams, maybe. It's like strawberry. It's better with cream. By the way, there's a random piece of banter for you. If you've never heard this is actually amazing. Because the thing about British people is every now and then they'll just be like a bit weird and like a bit silly in their personality. So they did this feature once at Wimbledon, Monty, where they asked the big four, which was Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, and Murray. They were the big four people who always won all the Grand Slams and always in the semis. So they asked them when Wimbledon came along, right, answer this question. How do you eat strawberries? So Federer from Switzerland goes with cream. And then Nadal from Spain goes with cream. And then Djokovic goes like with cream. And then they ask Murray, who's British, Scottish admittedly, but he's British, that still counts. And he goes with my fingers. And he wasn't joking, like he just totally took it the wrong way, you know. It's like that's like the saying, you know, like fucking like which hand do you wipe your ass with? Like, how dare you? I use toilet paper, like, you know what I mean? Like, give me a break. Like, you took it too literally, much like Twitter.
Too funny.
New questions?
Yeah, guys, there's not that much to talk about with LPL because we need to wait for the first round to finish because frankly, guys, I'm just gonna be real with you. I'm not watching EDG versus WE. I'm not watching RNG versus NIP. I'm waiting for OMG and Weibo to play, and then I will start watching LPL. So we can have a chat about LPL next week. Once we get through some of the actually by the time next week is over, we'll have even gotten through the top and LNG matches. So
also, I'll just throw this out there because I'm spicy like this. Unlike past years where actually, like some of the aforementioned names, we actually were the people who broke the LPL talent out into the wider world, giving them a platform from which sometimes they got jobs in the West and worked worlds, etc. Believe it or not, now, this is how hilarious esports is, like referencing the certain Substack article. Oh, don't worry, there are top LPL talents who won't come on this show because that's right, they accept money from China to work on a Chinese league while people are getting the flu and they have to pretend like it's not happening and I see nothing. And all the time they won't come on our show because we're the people who are harming esports. So that's just the world we're in. If they all said yes, we'd have had a couple of episodes already. I've tried many, many times. You know that, Monty. I've fucking reached out. I've probably asked 10 times. So there's a few people could have done it, but they just didn't have the time. And some of them just outright say no. So fuck those people. You all take money from China? Bitch, I don't ever take money from fucking China. Literally, I did that something like 4 years ago now. And once Richard explained to me some of the things there, I even agreed with him, right? Before Saudis were, I was like, we can't take it from China then. No more going to China. Now, the joke was that was 2019, so I was never going to China again anyway. But I didn't know it at the time.
No one was going to China.
Didn't know it at the time, did I? Exactly.
All right, let's take a quick break and do some viewer questions, guys.
Right, we're back to do the viewer questions section. The questions, of course, being sourced via subscribers to our Discord. So go to the Last Free Nation Discord, subscribe there, gives us a better rev share than any other platform. And then you can ask questions. And as you've noticed, essentially, I don't know if he's ever admitted this publicly, but basically the questions asked here is sort of why we now have the Culture channel where we have the show where we do the thing and foreplay and all that jazz and sport and the LFN Sports one with the NBA show. Because basically when people would ask questions here, they actually want us to give like a 20 or 30 minute answer. Now, sometimes we do oblige you, but we can't do that every time. So it's actually one of the reasons why obviously people like it when we have the biggest discussions. That's also why we spun some of it out. So let's see what we have this time around.
Yeah. We'll talk about some other stuff that we might actually do, but there may also be a justification to the point of the Culture channel. It's spinning some of this off, some of the arts and entertainment questions into a separate video for that channel. We don't want to.
Would be fire. Here's what would be fire. Maybe we do this, Monty. Maybe there's a thing where we actually just have a channel where you can ask this. We do it occasionally on the Four Horsemen. Maybe we just have a show where me, you, and Richard answer Culture questions.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
yeah. That trio. I think everyone would love to hear that.
Right. Yeah, answer viewer questions. I think that probably
just only on the angle though. Yeah.
Yeah, because the thing about the culture content is we really don't want it to be more than like an hour per episode because we're trying to keep that really tight. And also we have, a lot more editing that goes into those shows because there's a lot of clips to show what we're talking about. So having, an additional hour or hour and a half of questions at the end of those kind of out of the question, but it's not out of the question to occasionally do potential viewer question standalone content. All right. Who is an esports player that has always had your back? I guess in terms of somebody, I guess, from behind the scenes who's always supported us. This kind of gets dangerous because it could reveal potential sources for things. You know what I mean, Thorin?
I mean, only if you give away one like that. I would just say pick someone who's always been supported. Maybe even people who've publicly supported you in hard times. Like, I'll give you an example. You could say Crumbs for you.
Yeah. Crumbs is definitely, I mean, he's a very close friend of mine as well, and continues to be a friend of mine, actually, even now that he's outside of esports. I talk to him with relative frequency. So, love Crumbs. That is a very good one.
Who would I pick for this? There's loads I could go with for this. Like, off the top of my head, I'm going to say people like in CSGO, I would say NBK has been a pretty good one generally. There's only like been brief moments where, look, he can be contentious with anyone. In general, he's been pretty good throughout the. Basically, there's a few people in CSGO that were really cool in the sense that, like, even from the early days, even before I was doing analysis stuff, they were always like super open to doing content, and they would give you info, and they would like sort of like, if their other team, like, I'll give you an example of a story. I don't give a fuck, so I'll say the names. Everyone loves them anyway, so it's not going to change anything, Monty. Back in the day when me and Richard worked for DreamHack in something like 2016 or 2015 or something, I think it was 2015, because I made a joke about like some Fnatic player, I heard that like fucking Fallen and Taz, two like legendary figures in the scene, mega well loved, just went to DreamHack and were like, you shouldn't hire Thorin anymore. Even though, by the way, when I did that like first CSGO major after the online period where it was that huge mega major, Taz was like, brilliant to see Richard Lewis and Thorin on the desk. It's like, else you could go back in a time machine, you fucking say that to yourself. And I heard internally in the player group before they had the player union, it was people like JW and MBK who were like, get over yourselves, guys. Like, they're entertainers. Their job is to like call us out sometimes or make a joke. Like, stop getting in your feelings. Like, everyone, like they essentially stopped them doing like a moron boycott against us. So like, I think that's legit as fuck, mate. It's one thing to even just like have you back and say something else, but like to actually stand up for you for real and actually fight for like what you do. That's cool as fuck. I think people like that are legit as shit.
Yeah, I will say the most surprising players that I found had my back were not even League of Legends players. It was with Flashpoint. It was Get Right and Forest. Like the legendary NIP roster. Guys were so fucking cool to work with. When had a lot of respect for my career. We're both we're both old school like Brood War fans. So that when we started to do like hype videos with them, they were really excited to do it and really into it and super participatory. But just really nice guys, honestly. Like, and very, very surprising because I didn't previously have a relationship with them, but it's been really good ever since that point.
And I'll give you a couple in League because some of these probably aren't as well known. Like I've done shows with the people might not know this. I'll tell you one person who's always been mega cool with me for like 10 years now. It's actually Mithy. Because if you don't know, you can look up some of the competitive rulings, to be fair. Mithy was a bit spicy back in the day himself.
Yep.
And if you know, like, you probably learned now what Spanish people are like from those fucking fans of the LEC. Like, mate, he likes people who had the dark humor and and also were willing to just straight up tell it how it is and go, this person's shit. Because by the way, he's one of those players where if he thought he was shit, he'd tell his own teammates that was shit, mate. Like, there's certain people like that vibe. Some of them aren't too precious, you know.
Also, just back in the day, what happened in Origin was fucking wild. In 2015, just gonna put that out there. That if those stories ever come out,
they were the Sex Pistols. They were the rock and
Yes.
rollers who were also really good at the game. Yeah.
Someday.
I told that story before. There's another one. Soaz. I've told this story before. Dude, I did an interview or a talk show with Soaz after he'd already had all the Origin coaches like Ledark and fucking Hermit and all those. And the joke is, he said something to me in an interview like, I don't think there even are real coaches. I've never had a real coach. And I was like, but what about those guys? And he was just sort of like based like, yes. I was like, fuck, okay. He was the original fucking Giga Chad. Okay, what the fuck?
Okay. So this one is solve the riddle. What do you think the cameraman heard? Okay, so what happened is this guy went for all 3 days of LCS week 5 and all of his signs were shown on broadcast except for the last one. Says he's a C9 fan. It was C9 versus EG on the last day. I was sitting in the front row and it said, Cloud9, do it for Danny. And in small in the corners, #LFN, #SI. The cameraman had an over-ear headphone and microphone. We have the sign on the screen right now. Awesome. He pointed the camera at the sign. And then he heard something, turned it away, and looked for another sign. I saw him communicating with someone over the headphone before he turned the camera. So we're supposed to theorize what did he actually hear? Yeah, of course, guys.
No, shut down, swarm. You know, like some shit like that. Maybe code red. This is a renegades on fire. You know, like all the code words, I imagine.
Honestly, my favorite part. If I went to the studio, obviously they'd keep me off camera too. When I actually got into the Arcane premiere at the Riot campus because I got an invitation from somebody I knew, and I just happened to be sitting in a spot where they pretty prominently put me on camera during the Arcane premiere, which was super funny, by the way. I'm just surprised they didn't abort that camera shot as well.
Here's the joke. The real code word surely would be, it's a systemic issue. It's a systemic issue because anyone says that, quickly pan off whatever you put in the spotlight on then, take it off that and just look at it.
It's a great sign, though. By the way, Thorin, I think for Worlds this year, we should start actually just having a bounty contest to try and get LFN signs on camera at international events. So I think
though, do it more subtly like this. Like, here's what you should have done. You should have done something like made it just say something cool, like "Go Cloud9, you'll win." But then do something like make certain letters slightly different color, and it would have said like "Do it for Danny." If people like,
no, you just have to bait them.
Genius.
The reverse of the sign has to say "Do it for Danny," so you get them on camera, and then you flip the sign, and then you just have it. So I think we probably will start doing on camera bounties for fans doing LFN promotion. You might get kicked out of an arena, but as long as you know that that's a possibility of what could potentially happen.
To be fair, that's a metaphor for what happened to Monte. You might get kicked out of the whole thing. It might just be over for you, but is it worth it to make a statement and send a message to the world? Let's see. Do it all for LFN.
I will say, yeah, do it all. I will say that if you guys do this and the security tries to remove you, here's another promise I will make. Record it on your cell phone and we will retweet it for you so they can't get away with it. So we will help you. But yeah, we can try and start some hilarious bounties for getting some good shit on camera at international events. What do you think about a book series about the fall of a giant intergalactic empire and how psychology can be used to help guide its fall and shorten the Dark Age? I mean, I guess it's just
a premise for a book.
Yeah, just a premise. It just depends on how it's done. Yeah, I guess it could be interesting. I need more than that.
I mean, I will say the part that people don't understand, because you might be seeing it now, is because people have been sold the myth that there's just progress continually and everything gets better. Oh. They do that dumb thing where first they think they're smarter than all the people in the other time periods. Like, they're not. Like, the joke is, Joe Rogan has a famous line he always says about people in past years. It doesn't make any sense. He goes, and then he didn't even have shoes. It's like, Joe, there's a guy in India right now without shoes who's smarter than you. Yes. What the fuck are you talking about, you idiot? Like, that doesn't even make, that's a non sequitur. But also, like, the point you've made that's actually apt there is that as a civilization falls apart, you absolutely will actually like regress in terms of how people's minds work and how they think of the world and their perspective. You might actually become, like, this is essentially the notion of the fall of Atlantis, right? You might actually become way shitter many years down the line than you were once upon a time with all the etheric technology when we all lived in a spiritual dimension or whatever.
Yeah, it's possible this is actually just referring to something we don't know.
He's probably referring to some series that we don't know.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, excluding obvious troll games where the result didn't matter, what is the worst professional game of League you've watched? Come on, man. It's obviously Renegades versus Dignitas. It's the thing.
People in the chat are saying, because we said last time we didn't watch this, they're saying it's like Foundation by Asimov. I did read that first book, but I only read the first one. It was a long time ago.
I haven't read it.
Or whatever.
So obvious, like it is Renegades versus Dignitas, dude. I died inside watching that game. So I don't know how you could argue that it isn't that game. There was
that one that Dignitas played against Curse that was like 80 minutes long. That was one of the worst games I've ever seen as well. That was pretty bad. I think that was season 4.
The Gamer Doc video by Thorin was the verbal equivalent of DeAndre Jordan dunking on Brandon Knight. Only difference was that video lasted 2 hours. Do you two have any nemesis in esports you haven't called out or are waiting to call out? Oh, of course, we have tons, dude. There's tons of people. The thing about GamerDoc is this is a person who has publicly displayed their stupidity. There are a lot of people in esports who just exist behind the curtain who are fucking horrible and continue to be horrible and continue to get promoted within their various organizations despite being responsible for some of the biggest mistakes in esports and being dumbasses. But again, as I've said this, I don't do the hits on those people because they're not public people. So there you go. But there are tons of morons. There's an endless supply of morons.
I'll just say it because I said it on Twitter anyway. I'm not ever going to do it in the sense that, like, put it this way, to do articles like that, not only did I collect all the tweets, I actually went and dug around behind the scenes and did investigative journalism and compared stories. That takes a lot of time. People don't know how much time consuming that. Like, that isn't even worth my time for the money I make back from the ad rev. Like, that might be like 15 hours. And I'm getting back like what, the $150 from the videos. Like, it's not, that ain't worth my time. So I only do that when it's like, 1, a righteous takedown. And then 2, I'm not going to do it if it impacts my content. So what I've told people on Twitter is this: as long as it doesn't affect my actual content, because I'm very productive and like I manage my time very well, I'm just going to keep like a pet project like that to the side every month or 2. And then, as I say, I'm always going to make time for the Wayne Grows of the world. You're always going to make time for the Wayne Grows.
Yeah, I think with that kind of content, yeah, it's hard to find a lot of the upside besides entertainment because the real excitement, by the way, of esports winter and the esports bubble popping is going to be that all of the frauds who are just here for money are going to weed themselves out. And that's a massive upside. In fact, that's why I'm so excited about the esports bubble being popped, is that the grifters are going to go away slowly. How does one become a brilliant computer running at peak efficiency, annihilating goals with vigor without crashing down and becoming a slug human whose shining accomplishment is feeding oneself one meal that isn't microwave? No, I don't know what this is.
This actually is a tweet that Gamer Doc made.
Oh, right. I remember from your video. Yeah,
the reason why he brings it up is because another thing I did, which, listen, it is petty, but it's also a great point, is if your whole job, Monty, because she'd said many times that to be at your peak performance, you have to take care of your health, your nutrition, your exercise. Right. But also, she also pointed out that, like, it's an obvious point, that leadership is you do it yourself. You lead the way and you set the example. And so I just found loads of tweets like that where she would just say stuff that, like, all I had today that wasn't microwaved was this one meal, or like, I just ate a whole pizza by myself, or like, I just started exercising again. I'm really out of shape though, because it's been months, and it's like, physician, heal thyself.
Yeah, holy
I just thought that was a good angle. It's a good angle.
Yeah, that was a great part of your video. I don't know, man. Look, outside of me having a cold that you guys have heard about for the last probably couple weeks, it's been very persistent and annoying. I think it's really just a matter of making habits. I go to the gym 3 or 4 days a week, and I, at the same time, try and schedule out so that I can do 6 shows that I'm doing right now and run Last Free Nation as a company and try and raise my family and have, some amount of free time. It's tough, but I think if you just make it habit and you're happy at what you're doing, then it's not that hard. I do all the cooking in my house as well because I enjoy cooking and I'm good at it. So
I'll give you 3 tips. 1, if you've got the money, just hire a personal trainer. You might not keep yourself accountable if you go to the gym. Hire a personal trainer to come around every week and just train you for 1 hour. And by the way, they'll tailor it to you and who you are. If you do it, the best thing is, because you're not on your own at the gym, they won't just let you quit 10 minutes in. They won't just go, 9. They'll go, give me 5 more. Like that will actually it will work. It will help you. I'm telling you, I do it myself. If you want to sort out your nutrition, go and get one of those meal companies where you just pay and they deliver you pick out a bunch of the things from the menu online and they deliver the ingredients and you cook it yourself. Like Monty says, the thing is they give you very easy instructions how to make it. And also the reason why the food will taste way lovelier than if you make it yourself is because they give you all the stuff. Like they'll give you, what it turns out in most food is you make it too simple. It's not really just chicken and rice and vegetables. You need a seasoning, and you might need some type of special oil to go on it, and then a special vegetable that you wouldn't choose to put in, but it goes well with it. And when you put it all together, it's just going to give so much flavor. And then the last thing is, in terms of like making you feel like you don't procrastinate, schedule in your calendar, not just work, schedule actual free time to do cool things. Like schedule in your day at the beginning of the week, right? On Wednesday, I've got 3 hours free in the afternoon. So instead of just wasting my time on Reddit or YouTube Shorts, what I'm going to do is at the beginning of the 3 hours, I'm going to read an hour of a book that I want to read, I never get to. And then I'm going to watch a movie for 2 hours. Dude, you will, even though you're just wasting time, it'll be way higher quality than if you're just doing it in sort of like a dopamine hit approach. That makes you feel like you wasted your time. If you schedule it in, like I do it to watch the movie for the foreplay thing, etc. Yes, it's just way more satisfying.
Honestly, we've done 1 episode of foreplay, but it was really fun because we weren't angry about the degradation of esports, and we just all got to talk about a movie that we really enjoyed. And as part of this too, we're all of us are going to see movies we haven't seen. And so it's really cool to have that level of accountability where you watch the film every week and you really, you don't passively watch it, you actively watch it, you think about it, and then you can talk about it with other people who you respect and digest it. And it's already been really fun, and it's something that I look forward to doing and I enjoy the research for, right? So I think the more you just schedule that stuff in and hold yourself accountable, as soon as it becomes a habit, your life just becomes a lot better. It's just about fixing your habits. About a month ago, Monty mused on how one would live in today's world without having seen The Matrix. Yes, I did do that. As someone who hasn't, why? Just watch it. I can tell you that I could relate the general plot of the movie through cultural osmosis and various parodies, akin to how most people have an idea of ego, though I haven't read Freud. Okay, well, you should also do that. Love the show. I mean,
wait a minute. He didn't then explain it. So he goes,
Yeah.
it's okay. I'm so smart. I sort of just figured out what it was by osmosis, and I will now not explain what my take on the movie. If he'd have then said in 2 sentences without seeing the movie and he was telling the truth, sort of what it was about, I would go props, but he didn't say anything. Come on,
Yeah.
bro.
Also, it's not like reading Freud, which might take dozens of hours to kind of understand the landscape of psychoanalysis. It's a 2-hour movie, man. Just fucking watch it. It's also good. It's just good. Just do it.
By the way, it's also not some like hard movie, probably one of the most palatable movies ever. And
Yeah.
has an amazing first time watch.
Yeah, it's great. What is your spirit animal? I don't know. No clue.
I mean, the obvious joke, but sadly, too many people have used this one to be like honey badger or something, wouldn't it?
Sure.
That's my style. It's like, I don't give a shit that they're all sticking in my face, mate. I'm a fuck this beast. That's all.
I'll answer this in a weird way. So my Korean name is Baekho, which means white tiger, because I had a Korean shaman, and yes, there still are shamans all over Korea, in a trance tell me that I should be dead, but that I was being kept alive by a powerful tiger spirit. So there you go. What do you think are some of the best superhero movies of all time? I feel like we've answered this one. I think X-Men Days of Future Past is the best superhero movie of all time.
I will probably do a video on this fairly soon. So yeah, that's a pretty good one. Dark Knight's obviously pretty good.
Sure.
I actually think the best of the Marvel ones easily is Infinity War. I think that one's way better than the rest. I actually think Endgame's not that good. Infinity War is a very good movie on its own. Has a really good ending if you've never seen it. Any more I'll put in there? I think the first Spider-Man, the real first Spider-Man,
Yes,
like 2002
the Tobey Maguire one. Yeah, that was great.
Legit. That was good.
I don't really like superhero movies, so
I'm a big fan of Superman too, even though it's 80s. So if you can't handle it, you can't handle it. I just think the story's fire. That is for me, for real, for real. So there you go. There's some. Oh, Blade. Throw that one in there.
Oh, and here you go. Yeah, Blade is great. Quick follow-up from the same guy. You mentioned in a previous episode that X-Men Days of Future Past is one of your favorite superhero movies. So can you expand on why I think that? Okay, several reasons. First off, fucking insane cast. Second off, really, really good action scenes where the mutants are all using their power in combination with each other in super interesting ways. But most importantly, it's a rare movie that there's 3 different perspectives in that film. One of them is Magneto's, one of them is Mystique's, and one of them is the X-Men perspective, like Professor Xavier. And it's a rare film where they do justice to, you can understand and sympathize with all 3 perspectives within the movie, and they all have really legit reasons for doing why they're doing what they're doing, and they're sympathetic reasons. And unfortunately, X-Men Apocalypse is complete garbage. So the follow-up movie was really fucking terrible, but that movie's extremely well written, I think.
The key thing for me is, like, look, I don't think James McAvoy is as good as Patrick Stewart. I mean, that's not even a diss to James McAvoy. But Michael Fassbender is as good as Ian McKellen. That's the key thing. So when you casted Magneto, just as you did in the original, this is actually one of the very unique things about the first X-Men. X-Men and X-Men X2 are really good. One of the reasons why is they actually do justice to Magneto's character, and they don't just make him a villain or the bad guy. They make him someone where he has a different ideology, and some things he does are bad. But notice how sometimes, like in X2, he sometimes saves the day and is the person who you actually need because he can be an anti-hero. So to me, I actually think Fassbender, because they casted someone also who's really good at acting, was also able to deliver. Like he had the gravitas for that role. And then I also think it was a very, very ambitious superhero movie, in my opinion. Like some of those set pieces, like the one that, like essentially towards the end of the movie, without spoiling it, that was incredibly ambitious what they were going for there, and like the scale of it, and even the whole like time travel element. Like, I thought it was just, I even told you it's just a great standalone movie, mate. You didn't need to watch the other X-Men movies, just watch that one. It's just brilliant.
No, it's really good. And I think it just holds up better as a complete movie. I don't think that it has some of the highs of a film like The Dark Knight, where the Joker scenes are just incredibly good. But the reason why I think The Dark Knight is very good, but the reason why it falls down my list of best superhero movies is because everybody remembers the big parts, like the best parts of Dark Knight, and they don't remember the fucking garbage Two-Face parts. Everybody conveniently deletes all of the Two-Face scenes from their brain when they discuss that movie. And that movie would have been a million times better without those scenes than if it had just focused on the Joker parts. So there's some pretty bad parts to Dark Knight. But the good parts are really good. Just finished watching Reflections with Aphromoo. I think it's my personal favorite from the series. I've been seeing a lot of that sentiment, Thorin. The questions and setups were done masterfully. Aphromoo was really fun to listen to whenever he was storytelling. The whole interview was a delight to watch. Does Thorin have a favorite Reflections that he's done? And do you have a personal favorite as well?
Just as a joke, what about the one I did with myself? Because here's why
was a
that
great
is
one.
not just a joke. Because I actually did it for real, as if I was interviewing myself, as if I wasn't me. And I asked the questions I would ask in the way I would ask them. And also I reacted to what I was saying. So just have to watch it.
Also,
well
I
done.
interviewed you for one.
True. What would your favorite one be?
No, I think the one you did with yourself is the most innovative one.
It's quite funny because essentially, like I say, I did it like a method actor. I actually stuck to the fucking premise. I made myself do it. Like it wasn't just like
good.
a gag, you know.
Yeah, I think they're all good. Thorin, Existence team qualified to next year VCT. Have you watched the games? Are there some similarities in playstyle with his CS teams?
No, I don't watch Valorant. I definitely wouldn't watch low-level Valorant, so no. Like, it's kind of cool that they qualified, and basically a lot of people who were good in CSGO who switched over have had a lot of success in the game, so it wouldn't surprise me, but I have no idea what they play like.
How would you rank the 6 Dune books, or in Monte's case, 4? I know Thorin thinks God Emperor is the best. I mean, God Emperor is the best. That's true. What about the rest of them? I don't really have a strong I mean, they're all good. I do think God Emperor is the most interesting. I think it's God Emperor for me, Dune, Children of Dune, Dune Messiah. Because I think the setup of the entire series is very important in the first book. So I think that's my ranking.
Right, I would do God Emperor of Dune without, I won't give any spoilers here. It just has one of the most ambitious plots ever.
Yeah.
I think the protagonist's perspective is genius and actually is I almost can't believe a human wrote that actual story. It's so good. All the like historical things in it are unbelievable. The way they use like a certain recurring character is very unique. The actual twist is fucking a genius. It's so cleverly, you can't figure out how's this story going to end in an interesting way, but it does. And the actual sort of main plan that the old books were all leading into is fucking unbelievable. And obviously, like Star Wars, there's no way he did plan that when he wrote the first Dune book. He just was very good at working with what he had. So God Emperor's number 1. Number 2, I'm going to say Children of Dune. I actually think it's pretty underrated. What I love about that book is it has the whole young male protagonist aspect, which is another sort of like a rework of the first one. That's quite cool. And obviously, if you know what happens at the end, that leads into God Emperor. That's an insane ending. And then also the thing with his aunt, just except I leave it like this, they won't often spoilers. The thing with the ant is genius because essentially the ant's mental condition allows them to bring back another character that you only knew in one certain way as like a villain, and you actually get to like hear dialogue with that character, and it's used in it's a very innovative way to bring back a character basically. So that's number 2 for me. I thought it was a brilliant book. Number 3 is Dune. It's just a really good standalone hero's journey book. It's probably one of the best ever. Then I'm going to go, this is where it's going to get edgy. I'm going to go number 4 is actually Chapter House, the 6th one. A lot of people don't like it, but actually I thought it was a mega fascinating plot. Like it's very different because it's all about the Bene Gesserit. The other thing about the Dune books is, Monty, as they get later on, they're about different aspects of the universe. So this one's about the Bene Gesserit and seeing it from their perspective, what they're trying to do in history. And that's just like a really unique perspective. And essentially it's a totally different way. It's a very female book, actually. It's all about the way, because they're all women, it's all about the way women would plot and scheme and do political intrigue. And then 5 would be Heretics. So I'm going with the 5th book. That's one where essentially it is a stopgap between the first 4 and then the 6th one, but it has a character that they introduce again via the way people get brought back in Dune that I just thought was really brilliant. This character ends up having a mega twist where he just goes God mode. You have to see that. And then the last one is Messiah, number 2, which sadly, because it's just political intrigue and is sort of about the consequences if you did have like a universal event happen around you and in your name, like the guilt you'd feel. Unfortunately, that one it's not a bad book. It's just that the reason I also don't like it, it's very short as well, is it's mainly the reason why so many people never did read past the first one, because they got to that one and they were like, oh, is this what it's like? And then they just quit the series.
Fair enough. Okay, next. If you were the owner of C9 CSGO division with the Russian super team, would you invest in a partner slot at ESL and or Blast, or hope they can maintain a high enough place on the ESL ranking and qualify to the showdown and then to the finals repeatedly?
One, I'm almost certain they do have a partner spot with Blast, surely. Didn't they buy back in? They must have bought back in a Louvre agreement. Let me have a look. Cloud9 Louvre agreement, must be. Because that was like Flashpoint was years ago now, boys.
I don't know if they did.
Maybe they didn't. I mean, they're always in it because they're a top team anyway. Oh, maybe they didn't then. Fair enough.
Well,
In terms of buying a blast spot, I would say based on what I know from people like Lurpus who've sold blast spots in the past, it is worth it because basically put it this way, there's an episode on the actual fucking CSGO channel we just did of know-it-alls of CS that was about this topic. It was about things that are actually quite interesting, Monty, that basically to outsiders from CS are very counterintuitive. Like, for example, if you're a top team like a Na'Vi who has like not just a good player, but someone like Simple who like is the absolute best player at times, it actually is sometimes going to be worth, Monty, you spending hundreds of thousands more than you could get away with because it just, if you buy good enough players, it almost guarantees you'll make the majors and get the sticker money and you'll be in the blast part system and you'll get like more, because I think it works on a merit system of how well you play. You'll just get more of the share. So essentially the analogy is this: you might have to spend $1 million to almost certainly make 2 million instead of spending 500k and having like half the chance to make 2 million. You know what I mean? Like, so that's why CSGO is different at the moment. So essentially, as far as I can tell for Cloud9, since they've made like a super team of super mega mechanical talents, I would buy into the slots now. And that was probably when I would gamble on it, basically.
Well, I think, Thorin, hasn't there been leaks that Valve is not happy with the current way that these partner teams are operating? Or
that's
these
just if it's exclusive.
Right. But isn't that potentially going to affect the Louvre agreement teams for ESL? Yeah, exactly.
Valve's a politician. They just say stuff and no one knows if they do it or not. Maybe they do some, maybe they don't. You never know.
I think probably I would wait for the dust to settle on that, because if there's a possibility that they're going to open up, if Valve is going to force ESL for...
I don't think that's going to happen, personally.
All right, well, fair enough. You would know better than me.
Happens, by the way, like with LCS, people are going to leave the game. They're just going to leave and go to Valorant and games like that.
Yeah, fair enough.
You can't make money. Like, this is the only way the top teams make the money. It's from the rev share and the sticker money. That's the main money makers, you know.
Have either of you listened to The Lonesome Crowded West by Modest Mouse? I think that lyrically it might be up Monty's alley. I have listened to Modest Mouse, but not in
20 years ago.
While. Yeah, yes, exactly.
Everyone did.
I will give it a listen.
About 20 years ago, everyone listened to them, but it's a long time.
Well, in the Float On era, yes. You know, what was that album? Good News for People Who Love Bad News. That's what I've listened to. I have not listened to that other one, but I'll give it a shot. I think the Modest Mouse is fine. Do you think coaches in Western LoL teams will ever have the same status and power as coaches in traditional sports? I think some of them have a good degree of power. It just depends on the team and the coach.
The joke is, I thought it was going to be Korean coach, because he said like traditional sports. Well, the spoiler is, especially if you watch the NBA, that power has gone away now in the NBA. They actually aren't like the old. There's no Bobby Knight motherfuckers in the NBA now, mate. Like nowadays in the NBA, if you're LeBron, you do have the power to get your coach fired and overrule him anytime you want. So actually, I would say the opposite. I would say I wish there's real sports had like the actual power of the Belichicks of the world, etc. Like I hate that these superstar players like run the team, etc. Because in my opinion, you can't do both jobs, mate. You're the superstar player. You just fucking play ball. You know, let the guy who's the coach the team. GM.
I think it's going to be hard unless we have their former players, maybe those people. But it's an issue of both competence in terms of the teams empowering a coach and not meddling, as well as the players respecting it.
The big problem is because you get paid nowhere close to the money if you're a coach that you get if you're a top player. The players, this is actually how Reckless has survived his whole career, guys. You're viewed as more valuable because we're not only invested more in you, but you're the face of the org. So even if the coach is actually amazing, if it's between the star player and the coach is the one that goes in league. And I don't really see how you can overcome that because coaches aren't even treated by the orgs as valuable, unfortunately.
All right, this is potentially a spoiler question, because literally in your Dune response, Thorin, this would be considered a spoiler. If there was a Gola made from your esports persona, what would bring back its full memories?
Because if people don't know, it's like you sort of do things, like you train them in a certain way, you give them certain objects, I think, and that's like makes it sort of like attached to whatever the memories were of. It's essentially like clones, if you don't know, and that sort of brings out your like original personality or whatever. So I guess the joke here would have to be like, it'd have to be like my coat with the fucking furry bit around there, and then I don't know what else.
The train whistle.
That would be yours, yeah. Yeah, those are good ones. Those are good ones. And also someone just saying repeatedly in my ear, here's the joke. The joke is, here's the thing. What people don't know, Monty, just saying that, obviously, by the way, the one thing that was mad cursed, this is why Listen Loco had to die, is because Loco picked the name, and everyone knows this. I never ever do say Listen Loco. If it had been called Here's the Thing Loco, that would be genius. I never ever said Listen Loco. I might have said, listen, you fucking scrawny little twat. Fucking I might have said that. You know, I've never said Listen Loco. I know exactly. He was just going for some whack fucking angle like that, like some Dr. Seuss level shit.
Thorin, who are your favorite NBA stars or team in the current NBA to watch play? Ooh, I personally enjoy Steph and Giannis. DeMonte is a fellow Broncos fan. Do you have a favorite Broncos player throughout history? Mine is Champ Bailey. Mine's Von Miller. I'll just go ahead and answer that right now. Von Miller is my favorite NFL player of all time. Loved watching him play. I prefer defensive players, so Champ Bailey as one of the greatest cornerbacks of all time. Definitely a favorite. Super sad he never won a ring with the Broncos. Very tragic, but still got into the Hall of Fame, right? So he's doing great.
I don't really have a team. Like, the problem with the teams is they get ruined like every few seasons, and the player turnover is mental at this point in time. And like all those super teams have ruined the NBA. Shout out James Harden, Kyrie Irving, fucking Kevin Durant on that. You've actually ruined the fucking sport, you cretins, while winning a total of 0 championships while doing it. I would say my favorite players are Jokic. I was actually on that train years ago, because essentially, if you just know basketball, this guy has like actually one of the best skills in basketball, which is amazing passing as well as having an offensive game. That makes you unstoppable. This guy is like a mixture of like fucking Jason Kidd with like Bill Walton with like fucking and able to shoot as well. So just a fucking mega all-round player. Kevin Durant, I think, is fucking unbelievable. I think he might be the most unguardable like physique ever in basketball. He basically a shoot. This is like my NBA thing, by the way. You can go watch that. It's basically like a shooting guard in the body of a small forward who has mad handles and skills and clutch. He has everything, mate. It's only his weird idea of how to relate to other people and what team to play on that fucks his career up. I actually think he was the better player of his generation. And then last one, even though now it's going to be a down, everyone's going, oh, how can you spot? I think Jason Tatum is fucking fire, mate. His skills are really, really good. I think essentially he's just had a few sort of jitters in the playoffs, but you look how young he is. You don't give up on players like that. That's like Larson. I'm just keep doubling down on that, mate. It'll pay off in the end. You'll see. They're 3
also,
mega ones.
Subscribe to our new sports channel, Last Free Nation Sports. 2 of you mentioned your fondness of Seinfeld on previous shows. So my question is, what are your thoughts on the show's ending? Man, I actually don't remember the show's ending. I remember watching it at the time when it happened, but I couldn't actually tell you what happened in that ending. I guess it's never really.
One where they all like what happens is they get put on trial for all the things they did.
That's right. Yeah,
all the characters come back, all the bit pieces, and
right.
At the end,
and give testimony. That's right. That's right.
And at the end, they say, I just have an amazing memory. At the end, they say the same conversation that they said in like the pilot episode, like, well, why are you wearing a shirt like that? What do you mean? It's got buttoned down. If it's buttoned down, it's buttoned down. And then they end the show like, oh, look, it was all cyclical. Here's why that sucks. Because it wasn't an episode of Seinfeld. It was just an excuse to bring all the characters back and then try to end with a cyclical thing. What's great about Seinfeld is it's always self-contained, 3 different plots that start disparate, then weave together with humorous consequences and for each character. And at the end, the joke of Seinfeld is it's not supposed to end, is it? You're supposed to almost believe they just stopped making episodes, but in a fictional universe, it lasts forever. Because essentially the great thing about Seinfeld is they reset. I always tell people, you don't start on season 1. It's not a fucking series like that. You go to look online for the best ranked Seinfeld episodes. Just watch the top 10. They're each self-contained. You don't need to know anything else. It is like, that's what's great about it. The writing is so good and the performances, it sort of justifies itself. So essentially, I think they've just made the mistake of trying to actually end the show. By the way, as a bonus, if you've never watched it, on a later season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, they do a thing where he's making a new series of Seinfeld, and they do short ones. On YouTube, someone's put it all together in like a 15-minute, like as though it was like an actual episode. It's fire. Just go look it up. Curb Your Enthusiasm Seinfeld episode. Look it up now on YouTube.
Why is it that China has been able to do much better in LoL than in Dota in recent years? I don't know enough about Dota to say why they've not been doing well in Dota. Do you know?
I could tell you a little bit. Like basically in Dota, this is what's interesting, Monty. The difference between League and Dota is this. League, because of how Riot themselves instantly, like a fucking bonsai tree, never allow it to just grow out. They instantly start tweaking and cutting things off and making it has to just go the way they want, right? It means actually League is about just doing the same build path as the most viable one, the most OP picks, the best draft that everyone does. Like it is about that at the most fundamental core beyond like player preference and stuff. The difference in Dota is it is totally what Dota's like what Brood War was. It's a wide open meta where you can do all sorts of shit you want and they're not fucking with it 24/7. And so as a result, the Korean method is amazing in StarCraft and in League because it's iterative. You can figure out the best things. You can do them by flowchart. It's actually why I think Korea's fallen off a little bit in this era for the team fights against LPL. And in Dota, it's more like CSGO. There's a lot of creativity, a lot of moments for individual flourishes. If you don't know it, to this day, you can still play a bunch of the heroes in any position you want if you're that player, not if the hero's that good or even meta. So to me, the reason why in the modern day China hasn't been as good is they can't do the just spam this style approach. And in my opinion, the super geniuses aren't around anymore. They don't have the Zhao 8 and the old school Burning and fucking Ferrari 430. I mean, obviously in theory, they recently still had maybe, but his name is Somnus, but he wasn't on a top team for a few years. So the main issue is one, China China absolutely with PSG could have won those 2 TIs that OG did. They didn't though, because there was epic games. So that would have been sick. But then I also think what I'm getting to is in games like CSGO and Dota, the reason I want Korea to play them fully is I don't think they would necessarily be the absolute best. I think some players would be, which would be sick, like in Overwatch. But I think actually creativity is, LS always says, I agree, iteration is the strength of Korea and Asia in general. Creativity and letting individual genius flourish, but sometimes not with all the right fundamentals, is the West's biggest strength. So I think what you've seen in the modern day is it's not like it's the same team dominating. You just have a bunch of very good teams like Secret and OG, and you put these squads together and they have brilliant players. And when they get the right stack of players together, they win TI. They're the best ones. So I think to me, it's just more like it's styles of the game, basically.
Obviously, also the popularity. Not that Dota isn't popular in China, but LoL is the game in China. You know what I mean? And so the popularity of the game leads to higher investment, higher player base.
Siphoning all the people who would be mega Dota players.
Right. I mean, if you're going to play a MOBA and you want money, the answer is you're going to go play League of Legends and try and get pro at that, right? For the most part. Have either of you watched Stargate? I assume you're talking about the movie and not all of the other stuff.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
The movie was a banger movie. It's mega.
I think Stargate is definitely a movie that's going to come up at some point in time on Foreplay, just because I adore this movie. It's another Kurt Russell movie like we did with The Thing last week. Also has James Spader, who I really enjoy. The TV show makes people not go and watch it because they think it's going to be like the TV show. But the TV show was way more pulpy and sort of like it was. The reason the MacGyver guy was it's a TV series, wasn't it? It was half comedic. The fucking movie isn't. It's a fucking straight fire movie. Yeah, I know some people really like the TV series, but yeah, the concept around Stargate as a film is super cool and involves obviously ancient Egyptian stuff and the pyramids, and it's great. It's really good. I mean, I like a lot of that era of science fiction. So Stargate, The Fifth Element, these kind of movies I really enjoy. But yeah, I'm a big fan. What is the most significant moment in esports to you personally, either positive or negative? For me, the Expeke backdoor got me into League and esports. And for years, it was the clip I showed to friends to convince them to watch. Is there like a big play, I guess is what he's asking? I mean, it's obviously the Faker versus Ryu Zed versus Zed for me.
I mean, the one I would probably pick out, even though I will point out it is a fluke, would be when Simple at ESL1 Clone did the 1v2 on Nuke that he got the graffiti for that he got the graffiti one where he was, because if you don't know, the context was he wasn't even actually in Team Liquid then. He was standing in for Team Liquid. And at the tournament, at the time, he wasn't even the primary AWPer. At the time, they actually had JDM, the old CLG player, was the primary AWPer, but he picked up the AWP because back then he was even cracked on rifles, guys. He picked up the AWP and he was against Fnatic, who was considered like the second or third best team in the world. And everyone thought it was going to be Fnatic versus SK in the final, and this is the moment that turned the series. And when he did this move, even though it was slightly fluky because it was like a quick scope, which isn't accurate in CS:GO, when he did this insane 1v2, that just was the like absolute summit of the mountain that he created at this event, where he just proved that like he was going to be one day the GOAT, basically. Like you could just see at this tournament, like, wait a minute, this one player can just actually like Neo break the matrix and just win against the agents, as it was. He's winning against Na'Vi, Fnatic. He didn't do it against SK, but he was, in that moment, so I did all those tweets, which have aged so well, because for the next 1.5 years, Monty, everyone else in CSGO, including all the casters and analysts, said he shouldn't AWP, he's overrated, and he plays too stupidly. And essentially, he only had to get, I'm going to say, 10% better, and he was the GOAT of CSGO. So for me, that's why I did all the tweets like, mate, if he does this, he's going to be the greatest player to ever play CSGO. It's actually one of my best calls ever. So for me, that was the moment where I sort of saw, like I was in Dune, where I had the space, and then I saw the future, and then I realised this guy's probably the fucking GOAT if he keeps going, mate. There you go.
Who is the best esports caster turned rapper? I guess it's Dracos.
Nah, it's not Dracos. Just out of because here's the problem. You know, one of the things that's so whack about those songs, Monty, they're not even about League. It's just people who I would never choose to watch do music doing bad music.
Remember Freaks?
If
you guys want the real juice, look up Freak rapping. There you go. Punish yourself with that. We've seen Kaisa become first pick in China and Korea. Why haven't teams picked up counters and taken advantage of her weak early levels, such as Caitlyn Lux, which can take plates and pressure tower dives? Well, we started to see that with G2 picking the Callista into it. Problem with Caitlyn Lux is a very binary lane where you just you know what they're going to do. It's basically mandatory pushing, which if they're very strong can work, but at the professional level, some of these things are just really, really predictable. And also, if Caitlyn Lux doesn't get massively ahead, they really have a very hard time transitioning into powerful mid and late game states. Whereas Kaisa, yeah, maybe, if you fuck that up and Kaisa gets ahead anyway, you're going to have a very bad time in the late game. I love the new LFN culture show, Foreplay, and it got me wondering, what is your personal favorite genre of movies? I don't know if I have a favorite genre. I kind of watch everything. I guess maybe if I had to pick a genre of movies that I most enjoy, or like if a new movie came out, I would probably be the most excited to see it. It's probably historical fiction. So, period pieces, films like whether it's Gladiator set in ancient Rome or Master and Commander set during the Napoleonic Wars. I do like things that are derived from history. So that's probably my favorite genre, but I watch anything,
I'm not really sure, because part of me thinks if I have to pick like a famous one, probably sci-fi. It's just got so many like creative ideas in it. It's ones where you can just like the reason why I always say the movie Prime is good is you don't need any special effects. You can actually just do it all in your mind if the concept's genius enough and you execute. But aside from that, I could always just cheat and say essentially, I don't know what the genre would be, but whatever Woody Allen's movies are, I could watch and have watched every one of his movies. They're all like the same sort of a movie. I don't even know what they'd be, just like slightly philosophical comedies or something. But like, I think they're just really mega. I could watch them all. There's about 40.
I've watched very few of Woody Allen's movies. That's interesting. With the massive amount of content you guys produce on a weekly basis, how are you able to keep up with it and avoid burnout? I'm a very passionate classical musician, but often struggle with keeping energy levels high and a consistent intensity of practice and mindset. Just been doing it for years, man. I don't know. It's just always been a grind. I think it's a lot of what we talked about previously in this Q&A, which is scheduling in the downtime, I think really helps. Also mixing it up. It's not like all the content we're doing is the same. And especially now that we're doing more non-esports content, it's the change of pace that I find interesting.
Basically, I have a video on my side channel called The One Thing, where I explain how I schedule my time and how I get things done. And it's about time management and when you do it and what energy level you're at that point of the day and hitting the best energy point and then doing the most important thing. And then also within that, I actually schedule, like I say, real downtime. I have time where I watch a movie or I have dinner with someone and I am not ever touching my phone during that time period. I'm not ever going to check Twitter. I'm not even going to take a call. Like, it better be emergency if you try to contact me then, or I am not going to reply to you. And that time is sacred to me. I am not giving that time up unless it's incredibly important. And because I do it like that, I actually have real time off. Like basically, I'm doing the Gary Neville. I'm having mini retirements throughout the day. Because if you don't know, by the way, there's a little story for you, Monty. There's a really famous football player called Gary Neville who used to play for Man United as a defender. And because he had one of those jobs, a bit like esports people, where you never stop your career. Like, if you're like a youth footballer, into a footballer, he became a coach afterwards, then he became a broadcaster. And so because he just did all these jobs, you can imagine almost every day he's working, or he's traveling to work, or he's thinking about the work, or he's got. And so what he did is he did an interview, which was fucking hilarious, where because he just lived his whole life in this bubble, Monty, that's nothing like a normal person, he explains that the way you don't burn out is you just take mini retirements. And he said it could just be, a weekend. Maybe you go somewhere. It could just be a week. For a week, you go somewhere like sunny, and then you come away. And then everyone on the internet laughed at him, and they were like, that's called a holiday, you fucking idiot. But you have to realize what they didn't get is he doesn't get those. He's working the whole season for his whole life. And you can never go. Yeah, so, but I can see both sides. So the joke there is you actually have to do that for you. You have to give yourself an actual break, not just like play a game. You have to give yourself like a break from the internet, break from that, have good food, spend time around people, make it fun. Don't think about things in esports. So yeah, that's my tips. Check out that video.
Yeah, I also take time to go do stuff with my family and my kid every week where we go out and do things, and I don't spend time on my phone. I think one of the biggest things that I do that, some people don't like about me because it makes me at times difficult to contact, like Thorin's saying, is my phone is always on silent. Always. Always. So I have to deliberately choose to look at my phone. I don't care who the fuck is texting me. I don't care who the fuck is emailing me. If I don't want to look at my phone, I'm never going to see it, and I'm never going to get an alert about it. You know what I mean? So sometimes I'm just unreachable for hours and hours and hours, but I'm not going to trade that because I'm not going to be a slave to my phone. And another thing is, too, I think if you really want to engage in media, like read a book for a while, watch a movie, just fucking put your phone in another room. Jesus Christ, people. Like, people complain, oh, my attention span is shot. I just look at my phone throughout the whole movie. Like, just put it in another fucking room. Turn it off. You know what I mean? You are entirely in control of this situation.
Also, pick better movies. Pick one that's so compelling you wouldn't even think to look at your phone.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, just put it away. Not that hard. Have either of you read any Brandon Sanderson? I see a lot of people on the web plus IRL putting him in the league of some of the best fantasy writers ever. And reading him now. Was curious if you have ever read anything by him. So no, I haven't. Yes, I do know people that have. Thirdly, I don't like fantasy as a genre. So I prefer science fiction vastly to fantasy. In terms of fantasy, like, I've read Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, the classic fantasy. I read some of Wheel of Time. I'm trying to think of any other fantasy books I've even read.
Have you read any of the Game of Thrones books?
Nope.
Should probably read the first one. That you might like it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm probably not going to read Brandon Sanderson because it's not really a genre that I enjoy.
I'd just say no comment. I don't give a fuck. I've read a little bit, but I think he's overrated.
Yeah. I don't see how he could write books as fast as he writes them and have them be good. That's not a thing. What are some esports results that bummed you out personally the most, excluding games you had a stake in where you were a coach or an owner? I guess that's
okay.
Esports results that bummed you out the most.
Yeah, just ones that it ruined everything that it went that way.
The obvious one was KT IG quarterfinals 2018. That fucking sucked. Like, I wanted KT to win the world championship that year. There were so many great Korean players on that roster, and IG was just such an inconsistent team. You saw that in the group stage, and they just caught on fire at exactly the right time. And because of Riot's garbage format, we didn't even get to see it again in the final. We just got a quarterfinal match, and the rest of the tournament sucked balls. So that one sucked a lot. I was kind of bummed out by the Rox Tigers T1 result, where Rox
6 Worlds.
Yeah, that one sucked.
I was going to do that one too. Because here's the thing, SKT already got their titles. They already had them. Like,
Yeah.
if Rox wins that year, it just makes history so much different. People like Smeb has one, fucking Peanut has one, Bang and Gorilla get them. Like, that's one of those ones that it's a bit like the one I'm going to say now. So obviously it's FaZe versus Cloud9, the Boston Major. You have to understand everyone on FaZe except Olaf Meister never won a major, but they're all truly great players. And now all of them actually, except Guardian and Rain and fucking Nico, have won them. But at the time, that would have just been so perfect for history. Like, if Nico wins one then and fucking Guardian wins one, like, these are the players that like deserve to have them in history, sort of. Another one in League would obviously be the classic Blaze versus Ozone one, the one where I actually was even there at the finals. I flew out to see Monte. Obviously really disappointing fucking ending, because if you don't know, they were on a 13-game win streak. They'd actually mastered the meta, and there was no way they could lose.
It was also
the craziest Black Swan performance ever, and/or /drafting/Dardy, and all, it was all just garbage, mate, the whole way. And then that guy, to add insult to injury, had to do that fucking like capoeira move on stage, the manager guy, when he won. Like, get the fuck out of my face. Just get
also
out.
The fact that the Zac was used to neutralize Flame's dominance was like really terrible.
Essentially, it was anti-League of Legends.
Yep. Yeah.
And it was just Flame getting dove by like fucking Zed over and over again. And it's like a nightmare simulator for a top lane player. So if he had a championship, it would change how everyone views him in history, wouldn't it?
World's awful format has blue-balled us on many amazing matchups. But if you could time travel and fix one bracket at World, what matchup or matchups would you arrange to happen? I think we just answered that. Like, a lot of the problem is like
make a matchup that we didn't get though.
Yeah, I mean, well, a matchup I wanted to see again because of the format was KT-IG in the finals. Like, we didn't get it because the format wasn't.
He doesn't mean do a double elim. He means like change it, like so someone else makes like change the side of the bracket. Like, I'll give you an example. When T1 lost to Samsung in 2017, I wanted to see RNG versus Samsung, because I thought they were the two best teams, but they were on opposite sides of the bracket. They played in the group stage. I want to see that. I think RNG might have won Worlds then. I think that would have been a banger. So there's one for me.
Having in 2014 having Samsung Blue play RNG would probably also be interesting on opposite sides of the bracket, because we know how it turned out with Samsung White, but because Blue just lost to White, we never
recommit.
I think so too, but we can never know. Probably
the obvious one as well. I'll give you another one. Is I would like to swap it so that the season 10 Worlds, the one where it was Koreans on this side, Chinese on that one.
Yeah.
Can top esports just please play down one? Can that just be like one of the other semi-finals or something? That's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see Knight versus fucking Showmaker. That's the match I wanted to see, but I never got to see it, sadly.
Yep, those are some good ones. I mean, double elimination solves a lot of these problems, guys, if we had just had it. How did you get over the burnout slumps, if any extended hedonistic periods in your life? Never really felt that burned out.
I mean, I would just say no, but he means like when you indulge too much, like alcohol or
no. He says burnout slumps, or if any extended hedonistic periods in your life.
I'll just answer the last one. Basically, to me, I actually think there's nothing there. It's why that dream of like, the like classic American dream of like, I just want to like, stop working and then kick my feet up and be in a hammock with a pina colada watching a sunset. You wouldn't. That gets boring after a week. One thing I find is I've done that. First of all, I've had periods where I was doing so awesome in work, or I got so efficient I could just do a few videos and space it out. That gets boring. That's cool for a week. That's cool for 5 days. After that, I think men actually need battle. They need resistance. You need the gradual overload to feel like you're doing something, to have purpose in life. So if I go on holiday for a week now, Monty, the reason why I will completely disconnect is because, mate, at the end of like 5-6 days in, I'm going to be thinking, I can't wait to get back home and start fucking doing some stuff and writing an article and get back on my grind, get on the edge, So to me, it's like, it's good as a break, as a relief, as a let off some steam, but there's nothing there. Like, to actually be a dilettante, like I imagined one day, and be like a kept man, I think that's actually the nightmare. I think that would be the undoing of me if I did it.
Yeah, so also in terms of extended hedonistic periods, the reason why that doesn't happen anymore with me is because the hangovers just get worse as you get older. You know what I mean? And so I drink less than I used to, simply because the effects the next day are just completely shit.
Got to level up your nootropic stuff.
Maybe I
should tell you a few things.
All right, well, maybe I should just I don't know, drink less. Probably good for my health too. So I think over time the hedonistic periods just get more boring because it's all the same after a certain point.
But
You've
in
had
this
enough
way,
of those experiences.
even though, yeah, the first hour when you think of going like a cool after party with all people or go out, yeah, it's cool. But the problem is, it's like you're saying, like you actually realize it doesn't really go anywhere, does it? Like at the
No.
end, you just drink a lot of alcohol, they go to sleep. Like you
Yep.
always think that anything could happen now, and it's getting crazier, and everyone having fun. And like remember, about 2 or 3 hours in, it hits the peak, and then just goes down. And at that point, you just like
and then you
knocked
feel
out with
bad
a
the next
taco
day.
next to you or something stupid, aren't you? It's like the end of the day. Yeah.
And I agree. I think in terms of burnout slumps, I do obviously enjoy going on vacations, but my idea of vacations are very different than most, I think, other people's. So when I take time off, I don't want to go to the resort. I think resorts are fucking horrendously boring. And I do go to them, but basically after maybe like 3 days, I get bored out of my fucking skull. I mean, my idea of a vacation, like I can just tell you, the thing I want to do right now is if I were to take a month off, I would literally do this thing called the Snowman Trek, which is flying to Bhutan in the Himalayas and doing a 28-day trek, which is like going over multiple passes at like 16,000 feet, having yaks carry your fucking equipment. Like that's my idea of a vacation, is just walking for a month in the Himalayas. So most people don't like to do what I like to do when I have time off. But the reason I like to do that is that it's tough. It's an entirely new experience and I'm disconnected from the world. But a lot of the stuff that I would really love to do, a horseback trek through Mongolia. I mean, these are the things that I want to go do. I don't want to sit at a resort. As an interviewer, Thorin, are you more proud of interviews where the guest is very interesting and eloquent and makes for a banger interview, or are you more proud of interviews where the guests are more reserved and introverted and you kind of have to carry the interview through interesting questions or crafting questions to get the guest more comfortable and provoke reactions?
Here's what people don't understand is this is why they'll never understand who I actually am behind my persona, because I'm the opposite of how I actually appear. Like, I don't particularly like to talk to people, even though that's all I do for my job. I'm a pretty solitary person. So the joke is they would think it's me showing off and being the center. No, if it's up to me, I would do the one where I just ask a question and they just talk for 10 minutes and give all banger answers. It's all amazing. And even chat it. And then I just go to another question and I never have to have any filler. Whereas you see what it's like when someone comes on the show, they just don't talk or they give 2-word answers. It's like, right, I have to actually get all the tools out the toolkit, and then I'm just going to be doing fucking sweating, carrying, I'm like a Sherpa, just carrying the whole show the whole fucking time. I hate that in general. Yeah, you can feel proud of it in the sense like if you get a good interview, but you'd much rather just have one where it's like the other person's brilliant and you just sit back and they just get to be brilliant. That'd be my choice always.
Advice on how not to miss the point of a story.
I would just say maybe don't have preconceptions. Try not to just like assume things. Just essentially most of life, in my opinion, people just get in their own way and they second guess stuff. Just sort of let it happen. Just let it hit you and wash over you, then see what you take away. You don't have to get the point, by the way. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it. I think the whole like the point, that's sometimes overblown.
Okay. So next question is, any suggestions on how to best read and understand literature such as Homer or Socrates? Okay, I don't know how to
just taking like a fucking correspondence course. All the people who ask these questions, you know, by the way, these are some of the most popular fucking courses you would ever find online or in online universities ever.
Or
just go to classics department, go and look if they're doing like Homeric Odyssey. By the way, going to be one of them fucking 101 level classes of these topics. It's out there. You can actually just go and do. You don't. Monty doesn't have to actually tell you real now. You can go find it for real. Get a book. There's a load of books that tell you how to interpret the shit.
I mean, there's tons of courses on Greek literature and philosophy. I mean, first off, Socrates is a philosopher. I mean, there's so many problems with this question. Second off, Socrates didn't even write anything.
We don't even have any of his books, yeah.
We don't even have any of his books. The only thing we know about Socrates is because of fucking Plato's dialogues, right? So, like, the premise of the question is just flawed about knowing what Socrates did.
And I always thought there was a good joke someone made, which is that it does seem like Plato was just a stan. So essentially, it's almost like he's writing them all like, and then Socrates won again and everyone clapped. You know what I mean? Like, it's just him fucking, it's like him like Christopher Hitchens just wrecking everyone in debates all the time, whether his point was good or not.
I do love Socrates. Like, I think he's a baller. But, I mean, Homer, also, they were not in the same period. Homer existed hundreds of years before Socrates. And the events that Homer, he didn't even write it. Number one, oh my God, I don't even know where he created the stories. He was an oral tradition storyteller who wrote the poetry and memorized it and performed it as part of a musical performance with the lyre, by the way. But
Which is an
Homer,
instrument.
yes, is a Greek instrument. So Homer, I, I think everybody should read the Iliad and the Odyssey. How can I put this? It's like the Bible. It is a fundamental text for understanding Western culture and civilization. The number of references in the history of the Western cultural tradition to the Iliad and the Odyssey is it's innumerable, right? You can't function without knowing the basics of the Odyssey and the Iliad, just like you can't function without knowing the basic stories of the Bible, because there are going to be so many allusions to these stories in other texts. These characters are repurposed time and time and time and time and time again in Western literature, that it's almost impossible to understand any Western literature without understanding these books. But just take a course, man. Like, I have a liberal arts education, so it seems obvious to me, I guess, but maybe to other people it's not.
I don't think you're going to do that. So I would just say watch the 2004 movie Troy, starring Eric Bana and Brad Pitt. You'll enjoy it a lot more. It's a lot easier.
Low-key good movie,
it's not
actually.
A movie. People pan that one because it came after Gladiator. It's actually a good movie. It's not
Also,
Gladiator, but it's good.
Baller cast in that movie. And
yeah.
I've heard the extended cut of Troy is actually really good, but I've never seen it. Any recs for movies to watch while high?
I mean, I did actually suggest this is a potential thing for the future, but I'll give you some obvious ones. I mean, I like the early Kevin Smith movies, Clerks, Mallrats, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. There's some classic ones. If you want to go with other ones, Dazed and Confused. Can't really go wrong with that one, can you?
Dude, where's my car?
Yeah. I would say, by the way, any movie, by the way, about like 70s rock. So how about like Almost Famous? There's another good one for you. It's got
the Yellow
vibe.
Submarine animated movie from the Beatles, classic.
By the way, anime can be pretty good when you high. Watch like Paprika or
yes, Paprika.
Perfect Blue or something. They're going to be pretty intense movies. Yeah.
I'll tell you what not to watch.
I like to watch mindfuck movies. So I watch stuff like Dark City, The Matrix, The Inflaw. I want movies where like the concept's like, oh, holy shit, oh, being John Malkovich. These are some movies to fucking bake your noodles, son.
Yeah, Charlie Kaufman movies are probably very good.
Some of the best of all time, yeah. Adaptation, all of these movies, mate.
Don't watch Mandy High. I made that mistake. That was not fun.
I watched it high, but here's the thing. I'm at the top of the dojo. You have to understand what you know, intrusive thoughts, scary ideas. I've been through 4 tours of Vietnam, mate. You know what I mean? I can handle it most of the time. There are some times where I do go, I'm just going to pause this here. But I did get through that one. It's pretty intense, I will say. Pretty intense. It's pretty intense.
Any chance of FreeSpipe sponsoring a live stream of a duo queue featuring Thorin, Spike, Terrorism, and Forgiven? That would be funny. We might. I think there's some other stuff, especially with the culture channel.
The problem is, here's the thing. It'd be one thing if me and Monty played. I wouldn't play with Forgiven, because if you don't know, that's not a joke. He flames everyone he plays with if they don't play perfectly. Like, even if you're his friend, he would flame you. That's just who he is. So the joke is, I would not want to be high and have fucking Forgiven just flaming the shit out of me as I make non-professional grade moves in League of Legends. That sounds actually like a real bomber high. Like, that would be a bit of a downer for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The joke is, the reason I'm a Pike terrorist is there's no comms in this game and I mute everyone. So I'm just fucking, I don't give a shit what they're doing. I'm having fun. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. They're all having a horrible time. I told you, if he doesn't go in Monty on the first 6 levels, second I hit 6, I just run the whole game. I just go to like the mid laner and play with him all game. You can sit under your tower like reckless, mate. I don't give a shit. MF that'll never go in, bitch made motherfucker. Exactly.
I think in terms of other FreeSpipe stuff, we'll think about some stuff we can do. Obviously, like, maybe this is looking into the future, but there's a world where next year, as we continue to build out foreplay, we could do a stoner movie month that leads into 420. You guys know what I mean? That'd be fun. We could also do a watch party on Discord where we watch a movie and just MST3K style it. Obviously, we wouldn't be streaming the movie, but you guys sync with us and we watch it and are high and laughing at it or whatever. I wouldn't mind doing that either. So we'll see if there's some partnership stuff we could do with FreeSpipe on that front. And that's it. It's the last question for this week. So thank you guys very much. We'll see you for another episode of SI next week.